Ethan Brooks had 30 seconds to make an impossible choice. Through the rain-streaked windshield of his 15-year-old Honda, he watched a woman step from her Mercedes directly into the path of an 18-wheeler that wouldn't stop in time. His daughter's future hung on the interview waiting across this bridge, the job that would end the evictions, the hunger, the shame of failing her. But between him and that future stood a stranger about to die. His hand hit the door handle. Some choices don't wait for permission. If you're watching from your city tonight, drop a comment below and let me know where this story is reaching. Hit that like button and stay until the end, because what happens next will change everything you think you know about sacrifice and second chances. The bridge had been stopped for 7 minutes. Ethan Brooks checked his phone for the 14th time, watching the interview appointment slip further into the past with each passing second. 10:47 a.m. He was supposed to be walking into Hale Industries' executive offices right now, freshly pressed resume in hand, ready to deliver the performance of his life. Instead, he sat trapped in gridlock on the Morrison Bridge, rain hammering against metal and glass, his entire future dissolving in the downpour. "Come on," he muttered, leaning forward as if those few inches might reveal what had paralyzed 3 lanes of traffic. "Come on, come on, come on!" His phone buzzed. Maya's school. He declined the call. Whatever it was, it would have to wait. Everything had to wait for this interview. 6 months of applications, countless rejections, and finally, impossibly, Hale Industries had called him back. Operations manager, $85,000 a year. Benefits, stability, everything he and Maya desperately needed. The wipers scraped across the windshield in rhythmic desperation, and through the cleared arc of glass, Ethan caught movement ahead. Someone was getting out of their car. A woman in a gray business suit, stepping from a black Mercedes that probably cost more than he'd earned in the past 3 years combined. She stood beside her open door, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing with her free hand in obvious frustration. Ethan understood the feeling. He glanced at his dashboard clock. 10:48. The interview letter had specifically stated that tardiness would not be tolerated, that Hale Industries valued punctuality as a reflection of character. He'd set 3 alarms, laid out his only suit the night before, skipped breakfast to leave early. He'd done everything right, and the universe had responded with a traffic jam that might as well have been a brick wall. His phone buzzed again. Maya's school, persistent. He sent it to voicemail and immediately felt the familiar twist of guilt. Single parents weren't supposed to ignore calls from their child's school, but single parents also weren't supposed to miss interviews that could change everything. The woman ahead was still on her phone, pacing now beside her Mercedes. Even from this distance, Ethan could read the tension in her shoulders, the sharp movements that spoke of someone accustomed to problems that solved themselves when she demanded it. She probably had an assistant to call when traffic made her late, probably had a dozen job offers waiting, probably didn't know what it felt like to count pennies for school lunch money or explain to a 9-year-old why they were moving again. Thunder rolled overhead and the rain intensified. Through the deluge, Ethan saw the traffic ahead begin to shift, not moving forward, just adjusting, compressing, as people tried to navigate around whatever obstacle had created this nightmare. Hope flickered. Maybe if the jam broke in the next few minutes, he could still make it. He could call from the parking garage, explain about the bridge, beg for just 5 minutes of their time. The truck appeared without warning. Later, Ethan would replay this moment countless times, trying to understand how he'd known. Maybe it was the sound, that diesel roar building too fast behind the white noise of rain. Maybe it was the way the other drivers suddenly went still, that animal awareness of danger that predates language. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe he'd just looked up at exactly the wrong moment and seen what was about to happen with the clarity of inevitability. The 18-wheeler had been in the right lane, boxed in by gridlock like everyone else. But its driver had decided to use the shoulder to bypass the jam, building speed on that narrow strip of pavement meant for emergencies. 40 miles per hour. 50. The massive vehicle fishtailed slightly as it hit standing water, but the driver didn't slow. Couldn't slow, Ethan realized. The truck was too heavy, moving too fast, and the rain had turned the shoulder into something between pavement and ice. And directly in its path, still standing beside her open car door, phone pressed to her ear and eyes on the traffic ahead, stood the woman in the gray suit. Ethan's hand hit the door handle before conscious thought caught up. No, he heard himself say, but his body was already moving, already committed to something his mind hadn't finished processing. No, no, no! He threw the door open and ran. The distance couldn't have been more than 50 feet, but it stretched like miles. Rain hit his face, immediately soaking through his interview suit, the one he'd bought on credit 2 weeks ago. The one that had felt like armor this morning and now clung to him like a drowning man's last breath. His dress shoes, purchased at Goodwill and shined to a hopeful gleam, slipped on the wet pavement. He caught himself, kept running, aware of nothing but the woman ahead and the truck bearing down with the inevitability of mathematics. She still hadn't seen it. Still had her back turned, phone to her ear, probably arguing with someone about this delay, about time that belonged to her and was being stolen by lesser mortals who couldn't keep traffic moving. Ethan wanted to scream at her, wanted to ask what kind of person stood in the middle of a bridge shoulder without watching for no time. The truck was 30 feet away, 20. Its horn blared, a sound like the end of the world, and finally, the woman turned. Ethan saw her face in that moment, saw the realization hit, saw her body begin the too slow process of trying to move while knowing it wouldn't be enough. He hit her like a linebacker, arms wrapping around her waist, momentum carrying them both away from the Mercedes and into the lane of stopped traffic. They went down hard, Ethan twisting at the last second to take the impact on his shoulder. Pain exploded through his body as they hit the pavement, skidding several feet in the rain-slick street. The truck roared past where she'd been standing, so close Ethan felt the displaced air slap against his back. Metal shrieked as it clipped the Mercedes' open door, tearing it from its hinges and sending it spinning across 3 lanes like a playing card tossed by a giant's hand. The door hit someone's Camry with a sound like a bomb going off, and the truck kept going, fishtailing wildly now, its driver fighting for control. Then, somehow, silence. Not real silence. Car alarms were screaming, people were shouting, the truck's engine still growled in the distance. But the silence of stopped time, of a moment stretched so thin it became transparent. Ethan lay on the wet pavement, the woman partially beneath him, both of them breathing in ragged gasps that had nothing to do with exertion and everything to do with the sudden, violent understanding that they were alive. "Are you—" he started, but couldn't finish. His shoulder felt wrong, a wrongness that went deeper than pain. "Are you hurt?" The woman pushed herself up on her elbows, and Ethan rolled aside to give her space. She stared at him with wide eyes, green eyes, he noticed randomly, green like bottle glass held up to sunlight. Her dark hair had come loose from whatever professional arrangement it had been in, and rain plastered it to her face. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You," she managed. "That truck." "Yeah." Ethan sat up slowly, testing his body for damage. His shoulder screamed protest. His ribs didn't feel much better. When he touched his face, his hand came away red. "Yeah, that was close." People were getting out of their cars now, converging on them with that peculiar mix of concern and curiosity that accidents inspire. Someone was already on their phone, probably calling 911. Someone else had their camera out, because of course they did. Ethan had a dizzy thought about going viral, about Maya seeing her father tackle a stranger on the bridge, and almost laughed. "Don't move," a man in a construction vest said, kneeling beside them. "Ambulance is coming." "Jesus, that was... I saw the whole thing, man. You didn't even hesitate." Ethan looked down at his suit. The left shoulder was shredded, dark with blood and rain. His pants had torn at the knee, and through the gap he could see an ugly abrasion forming. The shoes were ruined, both of them, the Goodwill leather scuffed beyond any polish's ability to hide. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Somehow it had survived the impact. He pulled it out with a hand that shook slightly and saw the notification, one missed call from Hale Industries. Then, as he watched, a voicemail indicator appeared. 10:52 a.m. He'd missed it. After everything, the months of searching, the careful budgeting to afford the suit, the practiced answers to anticipated questions, the hope he'd barely let himself feel. He'd missed it. "Sir, you're bleeding pretty badly." A woman in scrubs had appeared, apparently a nurse or doctor stopped in the same traffic. She was examining his shoulder with professional concern. That truck's side mirror caught you when it went past. You're going to need stitches." "I'm fine," Ethan said automatically, then realized how stupid that sounded. He wasn't fine. He was bleeding on a bridge in a ruined suit with a shoulder that wouldn't move right and an interview he'd never make. I have to call. "You need to sit still," the nurse said firmly. "You just saved this woman's life. The least you can do is let us make sure you didn't trade yours for it." The woman in the gray suit was being helped to her feet by the construction worker. She stood unsteadily, looking down at Ethan with an expression he couldn't quite read. Shock, probably. Gratitude. Maybe a little residual fear. She opened her mouth, clearly wanting to say something, but sirens cut through the air before she could find the words. Police arrived first, 3 cruisers that somehow navigated through the gridlocked traffic with practiced efficiency. Then an ambulance, then another. Ethan found himself surrounded by EMTs asking questions he answered on autopilot while his mind churned through calculations. How long until they let him leave? Could he still call Hale Industries? Would they even care that he'd been in an accident? Or would they simply move on to the next desperate candidate? "We need to transport both of you," one of the EMTs was saying. "Get you checked out properly. That shoulder needs immediate attention. And ma'am, we should run a full assessment." "No," the woman said. Her voice was stronger now, carrying an edge of authority that made the EMT pause. "I'm fine. I wasn't injured. He took the impact." She looked at Ethan, and something in her expression shifted. "What's your name?" "Ethan. Ethan Brooks." "Mr. Brooks." She said it like she was testing the weight of it. "I'm Victoria Hale." For a moment, the name didn't register. Then it hit him with the force of the truck he'd just dodged. Victoria Hale, CEO of Hale Industries, the woman whose company he was supposed to be interviewing with right now. The woman whose HR department had sent him that rejection letter 6 months ago, and whose executive team had inexplicably called him back 2 weeks ago with a second chance. He just saved the CEO's life, and in the process, destroyed his only opportunity to work for her company. "Oh," Ethan said, and then couldn't think of anything else to say. "Oh." Victoria Hale was staring at him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. One of her assistants, because of course she had an assistant somewhere nearby, had appeared with a jacket to replace her ruined suit coat. A police officer was trying to guide her toward a waiting cruiser, but she waved them all away, her focus entirely on Ethan. "You were going somewhere," she said. It wasn't a question. "The way you looked at your phone before you ran, you were late for something important." "It doesn't matter now." "It clearly does." She glanced at the officer. "Give us a moment." Then to Ethan, "Where were you going?" He almost laughed. The absurdity of it, sitting on the Morrison Bridge in a shredded suit, bleeding from a shoulder wound, explaining to Victoria Hale that he'd been rushing to interview for her company. But when he opened his mouth, what came out was simpler. "I had a job interview. Operations manager position at Hale Industries. 10:30 appointment." He pulled out his phone and showed her the email, somehow needing her to see proof that he wasn't making this up. "I left an hour early, but the traffic..." He gestured at the gridlocked bridge, the statement finishing itself. Victoria took the phone, reading the email with an expression that shifted through several emotions too quickly for Ethan to track. When she looked up, something had changed in her face. "You were coming to interview with my company." "Yes." "And when you saw someone in danger, a complete stranger, you abandoned that interview to help them." Ethan shrugged, then immediately regretted it as pain shot through his shoulder. "Wasn't much of a choice. The interview would have been pointless if someone died because I wanted to be on time. Most people would have called 911 and kept driving." "Maybe." Ethan took his phone back, looking at the cracked screen, another expense he couldn't afford. "But I've got a daughter. I'd want someone to do the same for her if she needed it." Something shifted in Victoria's expression. She turned to the police officer who'd been waiting patiently. "I need details about the truck driver. Full investigation. That was criminal negligence at minimum." "Yes, ma'am. We've got units pursuing the vehicle now." "Good." She turned back to Ethan. "And I need you to tell these EMTs which hospital they're taking you to. I'll meet you there." "Ma'am, I don't think..." one of the EMTs started. "Not a request." Victoria's voice carried the unmistakable weight of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Mr. Brooks saved my life. The least I can do is ensure he receives the best possible care. She paused, and a slight smile touched her lips. Besides, he has an interview to complete. Ethan stared at her. What? You missed your scheduled interview because you were saving my life. I think we can make an exception to the tardiness policy. She gestured to the EMTs. Let them transport you. Get that shoulder treated. I'll have my assistant reschedule you for this afternoon. Ms. Hale, this isn't necessary. Mr. Brooks. She crouched down so they were at eye level, and Ethan saw something in her face that went beyond gratitude. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. In the last 10 minutes, you've shown me more about your character than any interview could have revealed. You made a choice that cost you everything, or so you thought. You prioritized a stranger's life over your own future without hesitation. That's not something I see every day. She stood. So yes, this is absolutely necessary. I want to know more about the man who runs into traffic instead of away from it. The EMTs were preparing a stretcher. Ethan let them help him onto it, his mind still trying to process what was happening. This morning, he'd been another desperate applicant. Now he was being loaded into an ambulance while the CEO of Hale Industries promised him an interview anyway. As they lifted the stretcher, he caught a glimpse of his Honda still sitting in traffic, door hanging open, hazard lights flashing. Everything he owned that mattered. Maya's school enrollment papers, the folder of his professional certificates, the printed directions to Hale Industries was in that car. My car, he said. I'll have someone deal with it, Victoria said. She was walking alongside the stretcher, her assistant scrambling to keep up while talking rapid fire into a phone. Focus on getting patched up. We'll handle the rest. The ambulance doors closed, and through the small window, Ethan watched the bridge scene recede. Police were redirecting traffic. Tow trucks were arriving for the Mercedes and the vehicles that had been damaged by the flying door. The truck was probably miles away by now, its driver either unaware of what had almost happened or choosing to run rather than face consequences. The EMT examining his shoulder was saying something about tissue damage and possible ligament tears. Ethan heard the words but couldn't quite make them feel real. None of this felt real. Less than 15 minutes ago, his biggest fear had been missing an interview. Now that same interview was somehow still happening, his body was a map of fresh injuries, and Victoria Hale was personally ensuring he received care. His phone buzzed. Maya's school, third call. He answered it this time. Mr. Brooks? The voice was familiar. Mrs. Patterson, the school secretary. We've been trying to reach you. Maya got into an incident during recess. She's fine, but we need you to come pick her up. What kind of incident? Some other students were teasing her and she pushed one of them. We have a strict no violence policy and I understand. Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of too many problems trying to solve themselves simultaneously. I'm actually in an ambulance right now. There was an accident on the bridge. Can she stay in the office until I can arrange pickup? Silence on the other end then. An ambulance? Mr. Brooks, are you all right? I will be. Just need some stitches, but I can't get there for at least an hour, maybe 2. Is there any way? Of course. Maya can stay with me. Should I call someone else? Family? There isn't anyone else. The words came out harder than he intended. It's just me and her. I'll get there as soon as the hospital releases me. He ended the call and stared at the ambulance ceiling. Perfect. Just perfect. His daughter was in trouble at school. He was bleeding in an ambulance. His car was abandoned on a bridge. And his interview, his impossible, surreal, second chance interview, was apparently still happening. The EMT was asking about his medical history. Ethan answered mechanically. No major illnesses, no chronic conditions, no regular medications, no insurance. No insurance? The EMT paused. Sir, this hospital visit is going to be expensive. Emergency transport, stitches, possibly imaging for that shoulder. I'll figure it out. Ethan had been figuring it out for 3 years now, ever since Maya's mother had decided that being a parent was too complicated and left them both behind. He'd figured out childcare and school lunches and rent and utilities and groceries and birthday presents and everything else that came with raising a child alone. He'd figure out one more bill. They arrived at Providence Memorial 15 minutes later. The hospital was familiar. Ethan had brought Maya here twice for emergencies, once for a broken wrist and once for a severe asthma attack. Both times, the bills had taken months to pay down. This time would probably be worse. But as they wheeled him through the emergency room entrance, someone was already waiting. A woman in a crisp business suit, tablet in hand, approached with purposeful efficiency. "Mr. Brooks, I'm Jennifer Chen, Ms. Hale's executive assistant. She's asked me to ensure you receive the best possible care." Jennifer handed something to the registration nurse. "All expenses are covered by Hale Industries, whatever he needs." The nurse looked at the card Jennifer had provided, then at Ethan with new interest. "Right away, Ms. Chen. We'll get him into a treatment room immediately." "Wait." Ethan tried to sit up on the gurney. "I can't let your company pay for this. It's too much." Jennifer smiled. It was a professional smile, polite but firm. "Ms. Hale was quite clear about this, Mr. Brooks. You saved her life. This is the absolute minimum we can do in return. Please don't argue. You'll lose." She wasn't wrong. Within minutes, Ethan found himself in a private treatment room with a doctor examining his shoulder and a nurse cleaning the various cuts and abrasions that covered his face and arms. The doctor ordered x-rays, then an MRI to rule out ligament damage. Everything moved with swift efficiency that came from knowing someone important was paying attention. 45 minutes later, Ethan had 12 stitches in his shoulder, another 8 across his forehead, and a diagnosis of severe bruising but no permanent damage. The doctor prescribed pain medication and rest, both of which seemed laughable. Rest wasn't an option when you had a 9-year-old who needed picking up from school and bills that wouldn't pay themselves. He was trying to figure out how to get to Maya when Jennifer reappeared. "Ms. Hale is waiting in a conference room upstairs," she said. "If you're feeling up to it, she'd like to conduct your interview now." Ethan looked down at himself. His suit was destroyed, his face was bandaged, and he probably looked like he'd lost a fight with a concrete mixer. "I'm not exactly interview ready. Ms. Hale is aware of your condition. She'd still like to speak with you." Jennifer paused. "And she's also arranged for a driver to pick up your daughter from school and bring her here. Maya, correct? 9 years old?" "How did she—" Ethan stopped. Of course, Victoria Hale knew about Maya. She'd probably had someone pull his entire background while he was being stitched up. "Did Maya's school agree to that?" "Ms. Hale spoke with the principal personally. Your daughter will be here within the hour." Jennifer gestured toward the door. "Shall we?" Ethan followed her through the hospital corridors, his mind struggling to keep up with how quickly everything had changed. This morning he'd been invisible, another struggling single parent, another resume in a stack, another person the world looked past. Now he was being escorted through a hospital by an executive assistant while the CEO of a major corporation waited to interview him. The conference room was small but private, with a window overlooking the hospital's courtyard. Victoria Hale sat at the table, still in her rain-damp business suit, a laptop open in front of her. She looked up as Ethan entered, and that same assessing look from the bridge crossed her face. "Mr. Brooks, please sit." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Jennifer, can you give us some privacy?" Jennifer nodded and slipped out, closing the door behind her. For a long moment, Victoria just looked at him. Ethan resisted the urge to fidget, to explain, to fill the silence with words that would only make him sound more desperate. Let her look. Let her see what she'd see. "Tell me about your daughter," Victoria said finally. Of all the questions Ethan had prepared for, this wasn't one of them. "Maya? She's 9. Smart, funny, stubborn as hell." He smiled despite himself. "Looks just like her mother, but has my terrible sense of humor." "And her mother?" "Gone. Left when Maya was 6. Decided parenting wasn't what she'd signed up for." Ethan kept his voice neutral. He'd learned not to let the bitterness show. "Been just the two of us since then." "That must be difficult." "It's life." Ethan shrugged, then winced as his shoulder protested. "You do what needs doing." Victoria nodded slowly. "Your resume indicates you have a degree in operations management from Portland State. Top of your class." Letters of recommendation from 3 previous supervisors, all glowing. 5 years of progressively responsible positions at Cascade Manufacturing before they closed their Portland facility. Yet you've been unemployed for 6 months. Why? Here it was, the question he'd been dreading, the gap he couldn't explain without sounding like he was making excuses. But after saving this woman's life, lying seemed pointless. Because I need flexible hours, Ethan said. I need to be able to pick Maya up from school. I need to be available when she's sick. I need to put her first, and most companies see that as a liability. He met Victoria's eyes. So I kept applying anyway, taking rejection after rejection, because what else could I do? Give up? Let us end up homeless? I've got a kid depending on me. That means you keep trying even when it's pointless. And today? Running into traffic? That was also for Maya? No. Ethan shook his head. That was just, you were in danger. Someone needed help. The interview mattered, but not more than a life. Even though that interview represented everything you needed? Especially because of that. Ethan leaned forward, ignoring his protesting ribs. Ms. Haley, I can't teach my daughter that success matters more than doing the right thing. I can't show her that desperation is an excuse for walking past someone in trouble. She's watching everything I do, learning what kind of person to become. If I'd driven past you today, I'd have made it to this interview. And I'd have failed it anyway, because I'd have known exactly what kind of man I'd become. Victoria was quiet for a long time. Then she closed her laptop and stood, walking to the window. Rain still fell across the courtyard, lighter now, but persistent. My father built Hale Industries from nothing, she said. Started as a small manufacturing operation in a garage. Grew it into a multinational corporation through hard work and smart decisions. When he died 5 years ago, I inherited everything. The company, the responsibility, the pressure to maintain what he'd built. She turned back to Ethan. Do you know what he told me before he died? He said that character is the only thing you can't fake. Skills can be learned, experience can be gained, but integrity, real integrity, is either there or it isn't. Your father sounds like he was a wise man. He was also dying, which gave him clarity most of us don't have until it's too late. Victoria returned to her seat. This morning, I was late for a board meeting because my driver took a wrong turn. I was standing on that bridge, furious about the delay, ready to fire him over something that wasn't even entirely his fault. I was so focused on my own importance that I didn't even see the truck coming. Anyone would have been distracted. You weren't. Victoria cut him off gently. You were late for the most important interview of your life, and you still saw, still acted. That's not luck, Mr. Brooks. That's who you are when everything is at stake. Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. I'm going to offer you the operations manager position, Victoria continued, but not because you saved my life. I'm offering it because in those few seconds on the bridge, you demonstrated exactly the kind of judgment and character I need in my leadership team. Someone who makes the hard choice even when it costs them everything. Ms. Hale, the salary is $85,000, as posted. Benefits include full health insurance, retirement matching, and flexible scheduling to accommodate Maya's needs. Victoria pulled out a tablet and tapped a few keys. You'll start Monday. Jennifer will handle all the paperwork and help you find childcare options near our office. Any questions? Ethan's mind reeled. I don't understand. You haven't asked me anything about operations management, process improvement, supply chain logistics, any of the actual job requirements. I've read your resume. Your previous supervisors all say you're exceptional at the technical aspects of the work. What I needed to know was whether you're exceptional as a person. Victoria smiled slightly. You answered that question on a bridge in the rain. The rest is just details. People are going to say you only hired me because of what happened today. Let them say it. I know the truth. You know the truth. That's what matters. Victoria stood, extending her hand. Welcome to Hale Industries, Mr. Brooks. Try not to save my life again. I'd prefer to keep the heroics to a minimum going forward. Ethan stood and shook her hand, his grip firm despite the pain in his shoulder. I'll do my best, ma'am. Victoria, call me Victoria. We're going to be working closely together, and I prefer to keep things relatively informal with my senior team. The door opened, and Jennifer appeared with a small figure behind her. Maya, her dark hair in the messy ponytail she always insisted on doing herself, her school backpack dragging behind her. She saw Ethan, and her face crumpled. "Daddy!" She ran across the room and threw herself at him. Ethan caught her, biting back a gasp as the impact jarred his injured shoulder. "Hey, baby, I'm okay. Just a few scratches." "The lady said you were in an accident. She said you saved someone." Maya pulled back to look at him, her eyes wide. "Is that true?" "Yeah, sweetheart. Someone needed help, so I helped them." Maya looked past him to Victoria. "Was it you? Did my dad save you?" Victoria knelt down so she was at Maya's eye level. "He did. Your father is a very brave man." "I know." Maya said it with the absolute certainty of a 9-year-old who had never doubted her parent. "He's the best dad ever. Even when other kids say mean things about us, he's still the best." Something shifted in Victoria's expression. "What kind of mean things?" Maya shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable. "Just stuff. About how we don't have a lot of money. About how we've moved a lot. About my mom not being around. But Daddy says people who judge others without knowing their story aren't worth listening to." "Your daddy is very right." Victoria stood, and when she looked at Ethan again, there was something new in her eyes. Understanding, perhaps. Or solidarity. "Maya, how would you like to see where your dad is going to be working? We have a really amazing cafeteria with ice cream." Maya's face lit up. "Really? Daddy, can we?" Ethan opened his mouth to protest. He was bandaged, exhausted, and had just accepted a job he still wasn't entirely sure was real. But Victoria was already heading for the door, and Maya was tugging at his hand with that unstoppable enthusiasm children deploy when ice cream is mentioned. "Come on," Victoria said. "Let me show you both what you've just become a part of." They left the hospital in Victoria's car, a different Mercedes, this one provided by her security team after the bridge incident. The driver was professional and silent, navigating through afternoon traffic with practiced efficiency. Maya pressed her nose to the window, pointing out landmarks she recognized, her earlier troubles at school apparently forgotten. Hale Industries' headquarters was a gleaming structure of glass and steel in Portland's downtown district. As they pulled into the underground garage, Ethan felt that familiar twist of inadequacy. This was where he'd be working. This temple of corporate success where his ruined Goodwill suit and battered Honda would stand out like graffiti on a cathedral wall. "Stop that," Victoria said quietly. Ethan looked at her, startled. "Stop what?" "Whatever you're thinking right now, that you don't belong here, that you're not good enough, stop it." She waited until he met her eyes. "You just proved you are exactly the kind of person who belongs here. Don't let imposter syndrome steal what you've earned." They took a private elevator to the top floor. The executive level was all open spaces and modern furniture, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the city. Employees they passed did double takes at seeing their CEO in rain-damaged clothes with bandages on her face, escorting a similarly disheveled stranger and a 9-year-old girl. The cafeteria Victoria led them to was indeed impressive, more like a high-end restaurant than a workplace dining area. Maya's eyes went wide at the ice cream bar, and Ethan found himself nodding permission before she even asked. While Maya loaded a bowl with enough ice cream to constitute a meal, Victoria guided Ethan to a quiet table by the windows. "You're going to face resistance," she said without preamble. "Some of my senior managers have been here for decades. They're not going to understand why I hired someone directly, especially not someone who's been out of work for 6 months. They'll question your qualifications, your experience, your right to be here." "I know. Do you?" Victoria leaned forward. "I'm not talking about casual skepticism. I'm talking about active sabotage. People protecting their territories and their positions. They'll test you, try to make you fail, hope you'll quit so they can say, 'I made a mistake.'" "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't make mistakes with hiring decisions, and I need you to remember that when things get difficult." Victoria's voice was firm. "You saved my life today, yes, but I'm not hiring you out of gratitude. I'm hiring you because in a crisis, you made a choice that revealed your character. That kind of integrity is rare. I need it on my team, and I won't let anyone drive you away." Maya returned with her ice cream bowl, climbing into the chair next to Ethan. She took a huge bite and immediately winced. Brain freeze? Ethan couldn't help but smile. That's what happens when you eat it too fast, baby. But it's so good! Maya took another slightly smaller bite. Ms. Victoria, thank you for this, and for giving my daddy a job. He's been really worried about money. Ethan started, embarrassed. It's okay, Daddy. Ms. Victoria already knows. She probably knows everything. Maya looked at Victoria with that uncanny perception children sometimes have. You're going to take care of my daddy at work, right? Make sure people are nice to him? Victoria smiled, but it was a serious smile. I'm going to make sure your daddy has every opportunity to succeed, but he's going to take care of himself and probably a lot of other people too. That's who he is. Yeah, Maya nodded, completely satisfied with this answer. That's who he is. They sat together as afternoon faded toward evening, an unlikely trio brought together by chance and crisis. Outside the windows, Portland stretched away in every direction, rain-washed and gleaming. Somewhere out there was Ethan's abandoned Honda. Somewhere was the apartment they'd probably have to leave soon. Somewhere was the future he'd thought was lost this morning on the bridge. But here, in this moment, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Possibility. Not certainty. He wasn't naive enough to think this job would solve everything, but possibility was enough. Possibility was what you built from when everything else was gone. His phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. All paperwork ready for Monday. You're officially in the system. Welcome to Hale Industries. Ethan looked at Maya, happily working through her mountain of ice cream. He looked at Victoria, already back on her phone but still present, still here. He looked at his bandaged hands and thought about the choice he'd made on the bridge. Some choices cost everything. And sometimes, if you're lucky, they give you back more than you ever knew to ask for. The storm was ending. Through the cafeteria windows, Ethan could see patches of blue breaking through the clouds. It felt like an omen, though he didn't believe in omens. He believed in showing up, in doing the work, in protecting the people who mattered, and helping the ones who needed it. Everything else was just details. Daddy? Maya's voice pulled him back. What are you thinking about? Ethan smiled and ruffled her hair. Just thinking that maybe we're going to be okay, baby. Maybe we're finally going to be okay. Maya grinned, her mouth ringed with chocolate ice cream. I already knew that. You're my dad. We're always okay. Out of the mouths of children, Ethan thought. Out of the mouths of children. Monday morning arrived with the kind of nervous energy that made Ethan's coffee taste like metal. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror at 5:30 a.m., adjusting a tie he'd borrowed from the Goodwill store manager, a kindness extended after Ethan had explained his situation. The suit was new, purchased with an advance Victoria's assistant had quietly arranged, but it still felt like costume armor over skin that didn't quite fit the role yet. You look handsome, Daddy. Maya appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, clutching the stuffed elephant she'd had since she was 3. You're supposed to be sleeping, baby. I wanted to see you before your first day. She patted across the cold bathroom tile and wrapped her arms around his waist. Are you scared? Ethan knelt down so they were eye level, recognizing the question for what it really was. Maya asking if she should be scared. A little nervous, maybe, but that's normal when you start something new. It means you care about doing it right. Will the people there be nice to you? He thought about Victoria's warning about the resistance she'd promised was coming. Some will be. Some might not be at first. But that's okay. We can't control how other people act, only how we respond. Maya considered this with the seriousness she brought to important matters. Like when Brittany made fun of my shoes at school? Exactly like that. You held your head up and didn't let her make you feel small. Ethan smoothed her hair back. That's what I'm going to do too. But you pushed her when she wouldn't stop. Maya's voice was quiet. That's why I got in trouble. I know, sweetheart. And we talked about that. Using our hands isn't the answer, even when we're frustrated. But standing up for yourself, that's always right. You just have to find better ways to do it. With words? With words. With walking away, with telling a teacher. Ethan kissed her forehead. The hard part is staying calm when someone's trying to make you angry. That takes more strength than pushing back. Maya nodded slowly, processing. Will you stay calm today? even if people are mean. I'll do my best. He stood, checking his reflection one more time. The stitches on his forehead were still visible, dark threads against healing skin. His shoulder ached despite the pain medication. He looked like exactly what he was, someone who'd been through something and was still standing. Now go back to bed. Mrs. Chen is going to pick you up for school at 7:30. I like Mrs. Chen. She let me have 2 cookies yesterday. Don't get used to it. 1 cookie is the rule. Maya giggled and scampered back to her room. Ethan listened to her feet padding down the hallway, the sound of her door closing, and felt the weight of everything settle on his shoulders. This job wasn't just about him anymore. It was about proving to Maya that hard work mattered, that integrity led somewhere, that the world occasionally rewarded doing the right thing. He couldn't afford to fail. The drive to Hale Industries took 40 minutes in early morning traffic. Ethan's Honda made concerning noises that suggested expensive repairs in his near future, but he pushed the thought aside. One problem at a time. He'd learned that lesson well over the past 3 years. You couldn't fix everything at once, so you fixed what you could and accepted what you couldn't. The parking garage felt different in morning light, full of expensive cars that made his Honda look like it had wandered in from another decade. Ethan found a spot in the back corner, as far from the entrance as possible, and sat for a moment with his hands on the wheel. "You can do this," he said aloud. "You've done harder things. You've kept Maya fed and housed and happy. This is just a job." But it wasn't just a job, and he knew it. This was stability, security, the ability to stop choosing between groceries and rent. This was everything he'd been fighting for since the day Maya's mother had left them both behind. The elevator to the executive floor felt impossibly fast, his stomach dropping as they rose. When the doors opened, he was greeted by Jennifer Chen, Victoria's assistant, looking immaculate in a navy suit. "Mr. Brooks, perfect timing. Let me show you to your office." She led him down a corridor lined with glass-walled spaces, each occupied by people already deep in work despite the early hour. "You'll be working primarily with our operations division, reporting directly to Ms. Hale. Your team consists of 12 people across 3 departments: manufacturing oversight, supply chain logistics, and quality assurance." 12 people reporting to me? Ethan had managed teams before, but never at this scale. Initially, yes. Ms. Hale has plans to expand your scope once you're settled. Jennifer stopped at a corner office with windows overlooking the river. "This is yours." The space was larger than Ethan's entire apartment, a desk of dark wood, chairs that looked like they cost more than his car, bookshelves waiting to be filled. Through the windows, Portland stretched away toward the mountains, morning light turning the river to molten gold. "This can't be right," Ethan said. "Operations managers don't get corner offices." "Ms. Hale's operations managers do." Jennifer set a tablet on his desk. "Your login credentials, security access, and first week's schedule are all here. You have a team meeting at 9, lunch with department heads at noon, and a one-on-one with Ms. Hale at 3. Questions? About 1,000, but Ethan settled for, "Where's the cafeteria?" Jennifer smiled. 6th floor. Coffee is free, everything else is subsidized. Don't skip lunch, you'll need the energy. She paused at the door. "And Mr. Brooks? Most people here are good at their jobs, but not all of them are good people. Learn to tell the difference quickly." Then she was gone, leaving Ethan alone in an office that felt like it belonged to someone else. He sat carefully in the chair. It was ergonomic, expensive, the kind that adjusted in 6 different directions, and looked at the empty bookshelves. 3 years ago, he'd had an office half this size at Cascade Manufacturing. He'd filled those shelves with industry manuals, process improvement texts, photos of Maya at various ages. Then the plant had closed, and all of it had gone into boxes that eventually ended up in storage units he couldn't afford to maintain. He'd lost most of it when he'd missed 3 months of payments. Starting over, he'd learned, meant rebuilding from nothing every time. His computer chimed, an email notification. The sender was someone named Richard Fordham, Senior VP of Operations. The subject line read, "Welcome to the team." Ethan opened it, expecting a standard greeting. What he got was considerably less warm. "Brooks, heard you're the new operations manager. Interesting hire. Most people work their way up to positions like this over decades. You must have made quite an impression. Looking forward to seeing what you bring to the table. We have high standards here. Let's hope you can meet them. Richard Fordham, Senior VP of Operations. The message was polite on the surface, but carried an unmistakable edge. Ethan had encountered men like Richard before, corporate veterans who viewed every newcomer as a threat or an incompetent until proven otherwise. Sometimes both. Another email arrived, this one from someone named Patricia Chen, no relation to Jennifer apparently, inviting him to the 9 a.m. team meeting. Then another from Marcus Webb in Quality Assurance, asking if they could schedule time to discuss operational protocols. Then 3 more, each with that same careful politeness that masked judgment. By 8:30, Ethan had received 14 emails, and maybe 5 of them felt genuinely welcoming. He spent the next 20 minutes reviewing the tablet Jennifer had left, memorizing names and titles, trying to understand the organizational structure he'd just been dropped into. Hale Industries was vast, manufacturing facilities in 6 states, distribution networks spanning the country, thousands of employees depending on decisions made in this building. And now he was part of the machinery that kept it all moving. At 8:55, Ethan made his way to Conference Room B, following the directions on his tablet. The room was already half full with people who stopped talking the moment he entered. 12 faces turned toward him with expressions ranging from curious to openly hostile. "You must be Brooks." A man in his 50s with silver hair and an expensive suit stood up. "Richard Fordham. We spoke via email." "Mr. Fordham." Ethan shook his hand, noting the grip that was just slightly too firm, the eye contact that lasted just slightly too long. Territory marking, pure and simple. "Call me Richard. We're pretty informal here, despite appearances." Richard gestured to the empty seat at the head of the table. "That's your spot. Ms. Hale likes her managers to run their own meetings." Ethan sat, feeling the weight of every gaze in the room. "I appreciate everyone taking the time this morning. I know you're all busy, and I'm the new variable in your routines." That's one way to put it. This from a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a sharper suit. She didn't introduce herself, but her nameplate read Patricia Chen. "We're curious about your background, Mr. Brooks. Your resume is impressive, but there's a significant gap. 6 months unemployment is unusual for someone at your level." "It is," Ethan agreed. "I was laid off when Cascade Manufacturing closed their Portland facility. Finding work that accommodated single-parent scheduling was challenging." "Single parent?" Another man, younger, with the kind of haircut that cost $200. Marcus Webb, if Ethan had his faces right. "That's going to be interesting in this role. Operations management isn't exactly 9 to 5. I'm aware. I've worked out arrangements for my daughter's care." "Arrangements fail." This from Richard, his tone conversational but his meaning clear. "What happens when your daughter gets sick, when school calls, when your arrangements fall through and you need to leave in the middle of a crisis?" The room had gone very quiet. This wasn't curiosity anymore. It was a test. They wanted to see how he'd react to pressure, whether he'd defend himself or fold. Ethan took a breath, thinking about what he'd told Maya that morning. Stay calm. Use words. Don't let them make you angry. "You're right," he said. "Arrangements do fail. Emergencies happen. But they happen to everyone. Single parents, married parents, people without kids who have sick relatives or personal crises." He met Richard's eyes. "What matters is how you handle it. Whether you communicate clearly, delegate effectively, and build systems that don't collapse when one person needs to step away. I've been managing crisis situations for 3 years while raising my daughter alone. If anything, that's made me better at contingency planning." "Contingency planning?" Patricia's voice was dry. "Is that what you call saving Ms. Hale's life? A contingency plan?" So they knew. Of course they knew. The story had probably spread through the building within hours of him being hired. "No," Ethan said carefully. "That was just doing what needed to be done in the moment. And getting rewarded with a job you didn't interview for." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Must be nice, having a shortcut past the usual hiring process." "I did interview," Ethan said. "In a hospital conference room still bleeding from 12 stitches. It wasn't the traditional format, I'll grant you, but Miss Hale asked her questions and I gave my answers." "What did she ask?" Patricia's question came fast, like she was trying to catch him in a lie. She asked about my daughter, about why I'd been unemployed, about the choice I made on the bridge. Ethan held her gaze. She wanted to know what kind of person I was under pressure. Turns out that matters more to her than whether I can recite supply chain optimization theory. Does it? Richard's smile was thin. Well, let's hope character translates to competence, because this company runs on results, not good intentions. I'd expect nothing less. Ethan pulled up a document on his tablet, which is why I spent the weekend reviewing last quarter's operations reports. I have questions about the variance in manufacturing throughput between our facilities. The Oregon plant is running at 92% efficiency, while Idaho is stuck at 78%. That's a significant gap. The room shifted. Patricia and Richard exchanged glances. Marcus sat up straighter. You reviewed last quarter's reports? Patricia's tone had changed, surprise creeping through the skepticism. Those are dense documents, 300 pages of data. 347, actually. I read fast when it matters. Ethan pulled up a chart. The Idaho facility's numbers have been declining for 6 months. Equipment failure rates are up, worker satisfaction scores are down, and there's been a 23% increase in safety incidents. That suggests either poor management, inadequate maintenance, or both. Richard's expression had gone carefully neutral. The Idaho situation is complicated. The facility manager retired last year, and we've been searching for a replacement. For a year? Ethan didn't hide his disbelief. While efficiency dropped and people got hurt? That's not complicated, that's negligent. Silence crashed through the room like a physical force. No one spoke. No one moved. Ethan realized he'd just called out senior leadership for what was essentially a failure, and he was barely 2 hours into his first day. But he'd also spent 3 years watching Maya learn to stand up for herself, teaching her that speaking truth mattered even when it was uncomfortable. If he wanted her to believe that, he had to live it. You're not wrong. The voice came from the doorway. Victoria Hale stepped into the room, her presence immediately commanding attention. The Idaho situation is exactly what Mr. Brooks described. Negligence dressed up as complexity, which is why he's going there next week to fix it. Victoria. Richard stood. I didn't realize you'd be joining us. I wasn't planning to, but I wanted to see how Mr. Brooks' first meeting went. Victoria's smile was pleasant, but her eyes were steel. Sounds like he's already identified problems some of you have been ignoring for months. We've been aware of Idaho's challenges, Patricia said carefully. We just haven't had the resources to... You've had the resources. You haven't had the will. Victoria took a seat at the table. Mr. Brooks, tell me what you do about Idaho. Ethan felt every eye on him again, but this time it was different. Victoria wasn't testing him. She was giving him a platform. The question was whether he was ready to use it. I'd start with the data, he said. Interview workers, review maintenance logs, assess equipment condition. Find out what's actually causing the efficiency drop. Is it mechanical failure, training issues, morale problems? Then I'd create a prioritized action plan with measurable targets and a realistic timeline. How long would this assessment take? 1 week on site, maybe less if people are honest about what's happening. And if they're not honest? Ethan thought about the past 3 years, about all the times people had made assumptions about him based on his situation. Then I'll look at what the numbers say instead of what people claim. Data doesn't lie. It just takes effort to read it correctly. Victoria nodded. Richard, arrange travel for Mr. Brooks. He leaves Wednesday. Patricia, I want you to brief him this afternoon on Idaho's history. Marcus, pull together equipment maintenance records going back 2 years. She stood. And everyone in this room needs to understand something clearly. Mr. Brooks is here because I hired him, yes, but he stays because of what he can do. I suggest you stop testing whether he belongs and start helping him succeed. Questions? No one had questions. Victoria left as quickly as she'd arrived, and the room slowly exhaled. Richard was the first to speak, his voice carefully controlled. Well, I suppose that settles the question of where you stand with the CEO. It settles that she expects results, Ethan said. Same as she expects from all of you. I'm not here to make enemies or prove superiority. I'm here to do a job. If you want to help, great. If not, stay out of my way and let me work. Patricia's expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but something closer to respect. You've got nerve. I'll give you that. Most people wouldn't call out senior leadership in their first meeting. Most people probably have better survival instincts than me. Ethan closed his tablet. But I've got a daughter who watches everything I do. I can't teach her to be brave if I'm not willing to do it myself. Marcus laughed, actually laughed, the tension breaking like glass. Fair enough. Look, Brooks, you're right about Idaho. We all knew it was a problem. We just didn't know how to fix it without making it a bigger mess. Maybe that's because you were thinking about it wrong, Ethan said. Sometimes the biggest messes require the simplest solutions. Show up, listen, fix what's broken. Not everything needs a committee or a strategic plan. Some things just need someone willing to do the work. The meeting wrapped up 20 minutes later with more cooperation than Ethan had expected. Patricia actually shook his hand on the way out, and Marcus offered to grab coffee sometime. Richard remained distant but no longer openly hostile. Progress, Ethan thought. Small, tentative progress. He returned to his office to find Jennifer waiting with lunch, a sandwich and soup from the cafeteria. Ms. Hale thought you might forget to eat. She's not wrong. Ethan realized he'd skipped breakfast in his nervousness. Thank you. How was the meeting? Honest. Ethan unwrapped the sandwich. They don't trust me yet. Some of them actively resent me, but at least we're not pretending otherwise. Jennifer's smile was knowing. That's better than most new hires get. Usually the resentment stays hidden for months. She set down a folder. Idaho facility information. Patricia will brief you at 4, but this will get you started. Ethan spent his lunch reading about a manufacturing plant that had once been Hale Industries' flagship operation. Built in 1987, expanded in the 90s, employing 230 people in a town of 4,000. The kind of place where the factory was the heartbeat of the entire community. And now it was dying, slowly, from neglect and absent leadership. The afternoon passed in a blur of meetings. Patricia's briefing was thorough and surprisingly frank. Idaho's problems stemmed from a facility manager who'd checked out years before retiring, combined with corporate oversight that had looked the other way as long as product kept shipping. The result was deferred maintenance, safety shortcuts, and a workforce that had stopped believing anyone cared. They've been promised help before, Patricia warned. 3 times in the past 2 years, corporate sent someone to assess the situation. Each time, the assessment resulted in a report that went nowhere. The workers don't trust us anymore, can't blame them. At 3 o'clock, Ethan knocked on Victoria's office door. She called for him to enter, and he found her standing at her window, looking out over the city. How was your first day? She asked, without turning around. Challenging. Eye-opening, exactly what I expected and nothing like I imagined. Ethan joined her at the window. Your team is talented but cautious. They're waiting for me to fail. Some of them are hoping you'll fail. I know. Does that bother you? Ethan considered the question. It bothers me that they're wasting energy on hoping instead of working. But their opinion of me isn't something I can control. All I can do is show up and do the job. Victoria turned to face him. The Idaho facility is a test. You understand that, right? I'm sending you to the worst situation we have, and everyone is going to watch to see how you handle it. Because if I can fix Idaho, they'll have to take me seriously. Exactly. Victoria moved to her desk, pulling up a map on her screen. But it's more than that. Idaho matters to me personally. My father opened that plant. It was his pride and joy, proof that Hale Industries could succeed in small-town America, that we could provide good jobs in places other companies abandoned. Her voice softened. Watching it decline has felt like watching his legacy crumble. I need someone who cares enough to save it, not for me, but for the 230 people whose livelihoods depend on it. What if I can't? Ethan asked the question he'd been avoiding. What if the problems are too deep, or the solutions too expensive, or then you tell me honestly and we make hard decisions together. Victoria met his eyes. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think you're going to go to Idaho and see what everyone else missed, that the facility's problems aren't mechanical or financial. They're human. People stopped caring because no one cared about them. Fix that, and everything else follows. Ethan thought about his apartment, about the way it had started feeling like home once he and Maya had arranged their few possessions with care. about how a place reflected the people in it, and how neglect wasn't just visible in broken equipment, but in broken spirits. "I'll do my best," he said. "I know you will. That's why you're going." Victoria pulled up a calendar. "Wednesday morning, 6 a.m. flight. You'll have full authority to implement immediate fixes, equipment purchases, staffing changes, whatever you deem necessary within reason. Jennifer will give you procurement codes and emergency contact numbers. Questions?" "Just one. Why me?" "You could have sent Richard or Patricia, people with more experience, more authority, more credibility with the workers." Victoria smiled, but it was sad. "Because Richard and Patricia see problems through spreadsheets. They'd arrive with clipboards and cost analyses and recommendations that look perfect on paper but ignore the reality of people's lives. You see problems through the lens of someone who's lived them. That makes all the difference." Ethan left her office as the sun was setting, painting Portland's skyline in shades of amber and rose. He should have felt exhausted. It had been one of the longest days of his life. Instead, he felt something closer to purpose. Mrs. Chen had Maya waiting at home, homework already done, dinner warming in the oven. His neighbor had become an unexpected blessing, a retired teacher who loved having a child around and charged exactly half what Ethan could afford to pay. "How was it?" Maya asked before he'd even closed the door. "Well, did you have a good day? Were people nice? Did you fix things?" Ethan scooped her up, ignoring his protesting shoulder. "It was hard and complicated, and I'm going to have to go on a trip next week. But yes, I think it was good." "Where are you going?" "Idaho, to help fix a factory that's having problems." Maya's face fell. "How long?" "Just a week. Mrs. Chen said she'd stay with you while I'm gone." He set her down, kneeling so they were eye level. "I know it's not ideal, baby. I know you'd rather I stayed home. But this is important work, and you're good at important work." Maya threw her arms around his neck. "I'll miss you, but I'm proud of you, Daddy. You're helping people. That's what you always do." Ethan held his daughter and felt the weight of responsibility settle deeper. She believed in him with absolute faith, the way only children can believe in their parents. He couldn't let her down. Couldn't let Victoria down. Couldn't let 230 workers in Idaho down. The pressure should have been crushing. Instead, it felt like clarity. That night, after Maya was asleep, Ethan sat at their tiny kitchen table with his laptop and the Idaho facility reports. He read until his eyes burned, making notes, identifying patterns, building a mental map of everything that had gone wrong and everything that needed fixing. At midnight, his phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "Stop working. You need rest." Ethan smiled and texted back. "How did you know I was still up?" "Because I'm still up too. And because I recognize the obsessive dedication of someone who knows people are counting on them. Trust me, Idaho's problems took years to develop. They won't be solved by you losing sleep the night before you even go. Rest. You'll need your energy." He closed the laptop and looked around their small apartment. The furniture was secondhand, the walls were dingy, and the carpet had stains that wouldn't come out no matter how hard he scrubbed. But it was theirs. It was home. And if he succeeded at Idaho, maybe, just maybe, they could afford something better, something stable, something that didn't require choosing between heat and groceries. Ethan thought about the bridge, about the choice he'd made in rain and traffic, how it had felt like losing everything but had instead opened doors he never knew existed, how sometimes the right decision looked like destruction until enough time passed to see what it had actually built. Wednesday morning would come fast. Idaho waited. 230 people who'd stopped believing anyone cared about them needed someone to prove them wrong. He could do this. He had to do this. Because Maya was watching and Victoria was trusting him, and somewhere in Idaho people were going to work in a failing factory wondering if anyone was coming to help. The answer was yes. Someone was coming. Someone who knew what it felt like to be overlooked and counted out. Someone who understood that the hardest problems weren't solved with spreadsheets and strategies, but with showing up and caring enough to do the difficult work. Ethan Brooks was coming to Idaho, and nothing was going to be the same after he arrived. The Idaho facility looked worse than the reports had suggested. Ethan stood in the parking lot at 7 a.m. on a Thursday morning, having driven from the airport through country roads that wound past farmland and scattered houses, and stared at what was supposed to be Hale Industries' flagship manufacturing plant. The building itself was solid, red brick and steel, built to last, but everything around it spoke of slow decay. Cracked pavement in the parking lot, weeds growing through the cracks, faded paint on the loading docks. A sign near the entrance that read, "Safety First," with 2 of the letters missing. This was what happened when people stopped caring, when corporate offices and gleaming towers decided that some problems were too distant to matter. Ethan grabbed his briefcase and walked toward the main entrance, his breath visible in the cold morning air. Inside, the reception area was clean but tired, furniture from the 90s, walls that needed fresh paint, a coffee maker that had seen better decades. A woman in her 50s sat behind the desk, looking up with the weary expression of someone who'd seen too many corporate visitors promise change that never came. "Help you?" she asked without enthusiasm. "Ethan Brooks. I'm here from the Portland office to meet with, you're the new guy Victoria sent." The woman's tone suggested she'd already categorized him alongside every other disappointing assessment team. "Tom Hendricks is expecting you. Through those doors, take the stairs down, follow the noise." "Thank you, Ms. Karen." "Just Karen." She returned to her computer screen, dismissing him. Ethan found the stairs and descended into the heart of the facility. The noise hit him first, machinery running at inconsistent rhythms, the clank of metal that suggested loose fittings, voices raised over the mechanical din. Then the smell, oil and heat, and something acrid that spoke of equipment pushed past its limits. The factory floor stretched away in organized chaos. Assembly lines ran in parallel rows, workers moving through practiced motions that carried the weight of repetition. But Ethan's trained eye caught the problems immediately. A conveyor belt that stuttered every few seconds. A welding station where the operator had to kick the equipment to keep it running. Safety equipment that looked functional but outdated. Workers whose body language screamed exhaustion and resignation. A man in his early 60s approached, wiping oil-stained hands on a rag. He was built like someone who'd spent decades on factory floors, broad shoulders, calloused hands, eyes that missed nothing. "You Brooks?" "Yes, sir. You must be Tom Hendricks." "Facility supervisor. Been here 32 years." Tom's handshake was firm, testing. "Victoria called yesterday. Said you were coming to help. That true? Or are you just another suit collecting information for a report nobody reads?" Ethan met his gaze directly. "I'm here to fix what's broken. Whether that makes me different from the others, you'll have to decide for yourself." Tom grunted, something that might have been approval. "Fair enough. Come on. I'll show you around and you can tell me what you see." They walked the factory floor for 2 hours. Tom pointed out problems with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd cataloged every failure for years. The injection molding machines that ran hot because the cooling systems needed replacement. The ventilation that barely functioned, making summer work dangerous. The electrical panels that occasionally sparked, terrifying everyone but too expensive to fix properly. The list went on and on, each issue building on the last until Ethan understood why efficiency had dropped to 78%. "How many safety incidents last month?" Ethan asked as they paused near a packaging station. "Officially, 4. Unofficially?" Tom's jaw tightened. "Probably double that. People don't report minor injuries anymore because they've learned nothing changes. Why fill out paperwork when corporate just files it away? Because every incident matters. Because minor injuries become major ones. Because..." Ethan stopped, recognizing the futility of lecturing someone who already knew. "Show me the incident reports. All of them. Official and unofficial." "Why? You planning to fire people for not reporting?" "I'm planning to understand what's actually happening so I can fix it." Ethan pulled out his tablet. "Tom, I know you don't trust me yet. I know you've seen people like me before, and they've disappointed you. But I need you to understand something. I'm not here to write reports or make recommendations that die in committee meetings. Victoria gave me full authority to implement immediate fixes. That means if something needs replacing, I can authorize it. If someone needs additional training, I can arrange it. If management is the problem, I can address it." Tom studied him for a long moment. "Full authority? Within reason, yes. Define reason. Anything that improves safety, increases efficiency, or directly impacts worker welfare. I can approve it on site. Anything over $500,000 or involving facility-wide restructuring needs Victoria's sign-off, but she told me to call her directly if I need it. Ethan gestured at the factory floor. What would you fix first if money wasn't the constraint? Tom didn't hesitate. The ventilation system. It's been inadequate for 5 years. Summer heat makes the floor dangerous. We've had 3 workers pass out in the last 2 years. 1 needed hospitalization. Corporate keeps saying it's too expensive to replace. How much? $180,000 for a proper industrial system that meets modern standards. Ethan pulled out his phone and called Victoria. She answered on the second ring. Brooks, how's Idaho? Worse than reported. The ventilation system is a safety hazard. I need approval for a $180,000 replacement. Silence on the line, then, done. Send me the specifications and I'll have procurement start the paperwork today. What else? I'll know more after I've been through everything, but Tom here has been cataloging problems for years. I suspect there's a list longer than my arm. Then work through the list. Fix what needs fixing. Keep me updated. Victoria paused. And Brooks? Thank you for calling immediately instead of sitting on it. She hung up. Ethan looked at Tom, whose expression had shifted from skepticism to something closer to shock. She just approved it, Ethan said, on a 2-minute phone call. Get me the specifications for the system you need and it'll be ordered today. Tom's weathered face worked through several emotions. Just like that? Just like that. Now show me what else needs attention. By lunchtime, Ethan had a list of 23 critical issues, 6 of which needed immediate attention, and the rest scheduled for the following month. He'd authorized equipment repairs totaling $90,000, ordered replacement parts for the injection molding machines, and scheduled safety training for the entire facility. Tom had called a lunch meeting in the break room, and word had spread. When Ethan arrived, 40 workers were waiting, a mix of assembly line operators, machinists, quality inspectors, and maintenance crew. They watched him with the same wary skepticism Karen had shown, the look of people who'd stopped believing in rescue. Most of you know who I am by now, Ethan began, standing near the vending machines because there was no podium or stage. I'm Ethan Brooks, operations manager from Portland. Victoria Hale sent me here to assess the facility and implement improvements. I've been walking the floor with Tom all morning, and I've seen enough to understand why you're frustrated. Frustrated? A woman in her 30s with grease-stained coveralls spoke up. That's corporate speak for, we know you're miserable, but we're not going to do anything about it. We've heard it before. You're right, frustrated is too mild. You're working with failing equipment in unsafe conditions while corporate has ignored you for years. That's not frustration, that's abandonment. Ethan pulled out his tablet. This morning, I authorized a $180,000 ventilation system replacement. It'll be installed within 6 weeks. I also approved equipment repairs, replacement parts, and safety training. That's day 1. Tomorrow I'll tackle the next set of problems. The room had gone silent. The woman who'd spoken stared at him. You're serious? Completely. Tom, tell them about the phone call. Tom stood, his voice carrying that same shocked disbelief. He called Victoria Hale directly, explained the ventilation problem. She approved the expense in 2 minutes. No committee, no review process, no bureaucratic runaround. Just done. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A young man in the back raised his hand. What about the conveyor system? Line 3 has been running rough for 8 months. Added to the list, maintenance team will assess it this afternoon, and if it needs replacement rather than repair, I'll authorize it. Ethan looked around the room. Here's what I need you to understand. I'm not here to tour the facility and leave. I'm staying the entire week, working alongside you, understanding every system and every problem. And I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. Some of these issues are going to take months to fully resolve. But starting today, you're not being ignored anymore. Why should we believe you? This from an older man with gray hair and suspicious eyes. We've had 3 assessment teams come through in 2 years. They all promised help. None of them delivered. Because those teams didn't have authority. They could only make recommendations. I can make decisions. Ethan met the man's gaze. But you're right to be skeptical. Don't believe my words. Watch my actions. Judge me by what actually changes, not by what I promise will change. A woman near the front spoke up, her voice tired. What about staffing? We're running short on 2 shifts. Maintenance is down 3 people. Quality assurance lost 2 inspectors last month. You going to fix that too? How many positions are vacant? Tom consulted a clipboard. 7 across all departments. HR has been searching for candidates for 6 months. Ethan pulled up his phone again. Jennifer? It's Brooks. I need HR to prioritize Idaho facility hiring. 7 vacant positions. Send me the job descriptions and I'll review them today. I want candidates interviewed within 2 weeks and positions filled within a month. He paused, listening. I don't care what HR's timeline is. Tell them Victoria approved it. Make it happen. He ended the call and looked at the assembled workers. Hiring timeline is now my problem. Questions? The questions came rapid fire after that. Equipment issues, scheduling problems, training gaps, safety concerns that had been dismissed by previous managers. Ethan took notes on everything, asking for details, pushing for specifics, refusing to accept vague answers. By the time the lunch period ended, his tablet was full of action items, and his mind was full of the kind of complex problem-solving he'd been trained for but hadn't practiced in years. As workers filed back to their stations, Tom pulled him aside.
You know what you just did? Listen to people who know this facility better than I ever will. You gave them hope. Tom's voice was rough. Dangerous thing, hope. If you can't deliver, you'll have done more damage than all the previous assessment teams combined. Then I'd better deliver. Ethan looked out at the factory floor. Tom, I need your honesty. Is there anything here that's beyond saving? Anything I should know about that's being hidden? Tom hesitated, then gestured toward his office, a cramped space with a window overlooking the floor. Once inside, with the door closed, he pulled out a folder from a locked drawer. Shipping manifests from the past 6 months. Take a look at the discrepancies. Ethan opened the folder and immediately understood why Tom had locked it away. The manifest showed consistent variances, products shipped that didn't match production records, delivery confirmations for orders that should have exceeded the facility's capacity, inventory numbers that didn't reconcile with actual stock. Someone's been falsifying records, Ethan said quietly. Not someone, multiple someones with cooperation from management. Tom's expression was grim. The previous facility manager, David Carlson, had an understanding with several of our distributors. They'd report higher production numbers than we actually achieved, making the facility look better on paper while skimming the difference. When he retired, his assistant manager took over the scheme. Who's the assistant manager? Guy named Derek Walsh. He's been here 15 years, thinks he runs the place. When corporate didn't promote him to facility manager after Carlson left, he got bitter. Decided if they wouldn't recognize his value officially, he'd extract it unofficially. Ethan felt cold anger settling in his gut. He's been stealing from the company while workers deal with failing equipment and safety hazards. Him and at least 2 others on the management team. I've suspected it for a year but couldn't prove it without access to the full distribution network data. And I sure as hell wasn't going to report it to corporate without proof. Last thing I need is Walsh finding out I'm the one who talked. Does anyone else know about this? Karen suspects. Maybe a couple of the older workers who've been here long enough to notice the patterns. But everyone's scared of Walsh. He's got connections in town, friends in the county government. Cross him, and you might find yourself out of a job with no prospects in a town this small. Ethan photographed every page in the folder with his phone. I need the distribution network data. Can you get me access? Walsh controls those systems. He's the only one with admin privileges. Not anymore. Ethan called Victoria again, explained the situation in careful terms, and within 20 minutes had full network access to every system in the facility. By mid-afternoon, he'd traced the fraud through 6 months of manifests, identifying approximately $300,000 in stolen inventory. The evidence was clear, the pattern undeniable. Derek Walsh had been running a sophisticated theft operation, using his position to falsify records while workers struggled with equipment that desperately needed the money being siphoned away. At 4 o'clock, Ethan called Walsh to the supervisor's office. The man who arrived was in his late 40s, well-dressed by factory standards, carrying himself with the confidence of someone who'd gotten away with something for a long time. Brooks, right?
Heard you've been causing quite a stir today. Walsh's smile was friendly, but his eyes were calculating. Authorizing all kinds of spending. Hope you know what you're doing. Corporate doesn't like surprises. Sit down, Derek. Ethan waited until Walsh was seated, then placed printed copies of the falsified manifests on the desk. I've spent the afternoon reviewing distribution records. Found some interesting discrepancies. Walsh's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Discrepancies happen. Clerical errors, system glitches. Nothing unusual. These aren't clerical errors. These are systematic falsifications designed to hide inventory theft. $300,000 over 6 months. Probably more if I go back further. Ethan pushed the papers closer. The pattern is clear. You've been reporting production numbers that don't match actual output, then pocketing the difference through your distributor contacts. That's a serious accusation. Walsh's voice had gone hard. You better have proof, because making claims like that without evidence is slander. Tom, I have 6 months of manifests, distribution confirmations, production logs, and inventory records. All of it showing the same pattern. All of it pointing directly at you. Ethan pulled up his tablet. I've already sent copies to Victoria Hale and our legal department. You're done here, Derek. The only question is whether you walk out quietly or in handcuffs. Walsh stood slowly, his friendly mask cracking. You have no idea what you're doing. I've been here 15 years. I have friends, people who matter in this town. You're some Portland outsider who's been here half a day, and you think you can just... I think I can stop theft. I think I can protect workers who've been suffering while you lined your pockets. And I think you're going to leave this facility immediately before I call the sheriff. Ethan stood as well, meeting Walsh's anger with steady calm. Security is already at your desk, packing your personal items. Your access codes have been revoked. You're escorted off the property today. Victoria will never back this. She doesn't know how things work here. How... Ethan's phone rang. He put it on speaker. Victoria? Mr. Brooks, I've reviewed the evidence you sent. It's damning. Derek Walsh is terminated effective immediately. I'm having our legal team contact local law enforcement to pursue criminal charges. Victoria's voice was ice. Mr. Walsh, if you're listening, Hale Industries will recover every dollar you stole plus damages. I suggest you hire a good attorney. The call ended. Walsh stared at the phone, then at Ethan, his face cycling through rage and fear. You're making a mistake. This facility runs because of relationships I've built. Without me, without you, this facility gets honest management and equipment that actually works. Tom Hendricks appeared in the doorway with 2 security guards. Derek, let's make this easy. Your stuff is boxed. These gentlemen will walk you out. Walsh left, still protesting, still threatening. His voice echoed down the hallway until it faded into nothing. Tom closed the door and leaned against it. Jesus, you've been here 8 hours. Sometimes 8 hours is all it takes to identify a cancer. Ethan felt the adrenaline starting to fade, leaving exhaustion behind. Who's next in the management chain? That would be Susan Ortiz, production coordinator. She's solid. Been trying to keep things running despite Walsh's interference. If anyone can step up temporarily, it's her. Get her in here. And Tom? Thank you for trusting me with this. I know it wasn't easy. Easier than watching this place die while someone steals from it. Tom opened the door. For what it's worth, you just became either the most popular or most hated person in this facility. Possibly both. Word spread quickly. By the time Susan Ortiz arrived, a woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and no-nonsense efficiency, workers were gathering in clusters, talking in hushed tones. Ethan could see the reactions dividing clearly. Relief from those who'd suffered under Walsh's management, uncertainty from those who'd benefited from looking the other way, and calculation from the 2 other managers Tom had suspected of involvement. Ethan spent an hour with Susan, reviewing the facility's actual production capacity and creating realistic targets. Then he called an all-hands meeting for the next morning, knowing he needed to address what had happened before rumors turned toxic. He worked until 9 p.m., going through personnel files, identifying everyone who'd reported to Walsh, flagging concerns for further investigation. When he finally returned to his hotel, a modest chain property that was the only option in town, his phone was full of messages. 3 from Victoria, approving additional expenditures and expressing satisfaction with his handling of Walsh. 2 from Jennifer, coordinating logistics for the equipment orders, 1 from Patricia back in Portland, grudgingly acknowledging that his instincts had been correct, and 1 from Maya, sent through Mrs. Chen's phone. Miss you, Daddy. Mrs. Chen made cookies. Save Idaho. Ethan smiled despite his exhaustion and called her. She answered breathlessly, clearly having run to grab the phone. Daddy, Mrs. Chen said you're fixing a factory. I'm trying, baby. It's complicated work. Are the people there nice? Ethan thought about Tom's cautious trust, Susan's competent professionalism, Walsh's betrayal, the workers' wary hope. Some of them are. Some of them need to learn to be. But we're making progress. I told my class about you today, about how you save people and fix things. My teacher said you sound very brave. Your teacher is very kind, but I'm not brave, Maya. I'm just doing what needs doing. That's what brave means, Daddy, doing things even when they're hard. Maya's voice was matter of fact, the simple wisdom of children who hadn't yet learned to doubt. I'm proud of you. After they hung up, Ethan sat in his generic hotel room and felt the weight of responsibility settle deeper. He'd fired a man today, exposed corruption, authorized hundreds of thousands in repairs, and given 230 people reason to hope things might actually improve. Any one of those actions could backfire. The consequences could cascade in ways he couldn't predict. But Maya was proud of him, and Victoria trusted him. And somewhere in this small Idaho town, workers would go home tonight believing that maybe someone actually cared about their safety and their futures. That had to be worth the risk. Friday morning's all-hands meeting filled the cafeteria beyond capacity. Workers stood along the walls, sat on tables, crowded the doorway. Ethan stood at the front with Tom and Susan flanking him, facing a sea of faces that ranged from hopeful to hostile. Most of you know what happened yesterday, Ethan began. Derek Walsh was terminated for theft and fraud. Evidence has been turned over to law enforcement. 2 other managers are under investigation and have been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome. I want to be clear, this isn't a witch hunt, but it is accountability. People who steal from this company while you work with failing equipment aren't going to be protected. What about the rest of us? A man in the back called out. Walsh had friends. Some of us might have looked the other way on things. Are we all going to lose our jobs? If you stole, yes. If you actively participated in fraud, yes. If you simply worked here while Walsh ran his operation, no. I'm not interested in punishing people for not being whistleblowers. Ethan scanned the crowd. But going forward, the culture changes. If you see safety violations, you report them. If you see theft or fraud, you report it. If you see anything that puts workers at risk or hurts this facility, you speak up. That's not optional. Easy to say from Portland, someone muttered. I'm not from Portland originally. I'm from a town smaller than this one, where the factory closing meant everyone I knew lost their jobs. My father worked 30 years on a manufacturing floor before the company decided it was cheaper to move production overseas. I watched what that did to him, to our family, to our community. Ethan's voice carried the weight of old pain. So when I say I understand what this facility means to you, I'm not making corporate speeches. I'm telling you I've lived it. The room shifted. People who'd been skeptical leaned forward. The hostility in some faces softened to attention. Susan Ortiz is now acting facility manager. Tom Hendricks continues as supervisor. Together, they're going to help me rebuild this place into what it should have been all along. That means honest reporting, safe working conditions, and management that actually cares whether you make it home in one piece. Ethan pulled up his tablet. The ventilation system is ordered. Conveyor repairs start Monday. New safety equipment arrives next week. We're hiring for 7 vacant positions, and I'll be personally reviewing candidates to make sure we get people who fit this facility's needs, not just whoever corporate thinks is convenient. How long are you staying? A woman near the front asked. Through next Friday. After that, I'll be back monthly to ensure progress continues. But I'm not going to micromanage from Portland. Susan and Tom know this facility better than I ever will. My job is to give them resources and authority. Their job is to run this place correctly. The meeting lasted 90 minutes, with questions ranging from specific equipment concerns to broader worries about job security. Ethan answered everything honestly, refusing to make promises he couldn't keep, but also refusing to sugarcoat the challenges ahead. When it finally ended, Tom pulled him aside. The two managers on administrative leave? They're scared, might try to retaliate somehow. Let them try. Everything I've done is documented and approved. If they want to make noise, they'll just draw more attention to their own problems. But Tom's warning proved prophetic. That afternoon, Ethan received a call from someone identifying himself as Councilman Robert Morrison, his voice carrying the smooth authority of small-town politics. Mr. Brooks, I understand you've made some dramatic changes at the Hale facility. Derek Walsh is a friend of mine, and frankly, I'm concerned about the way he was treated. Firing a respected member of our community without proper process seems hasty. Mr. Walsh was terminated for documented theft and fraud. The evidence has been provided to law enforcement. If you have concerns about the process, I suggest you speak with Hale Industries' legal department. I'm speaking with you. Morrison's tone hardened. Derek has connections in this town, people who value his contributions to the community. Treating him like a criminal based on some paperwork discrepancies is going to reflect poorly on Hale Industries. The $300,000 he stole isn't a discrepancy. It's a crime. And if you're suggesting I should have ignored it because he has friends, then you're part of the problem this facility has been dealing with. Ethan kept his voice level. Councilman Morrison, I'm here to do a job. If that makes me unpopular with certain people, I can live with that. What I can't live with is allowing theft to continue while workers suffer. Morrison's response was cold. You're making enemies, Mr. Brooks. In a town this size, that's not wise. Then I'll be unwise. Have a good day, Councilman. Ethan hung up and immediately called Victoria to brief her on the conversation. She listened without interrupting, then sighed. Small town politics. Walsh probably has half the county government in his pocket through favors and connections. They're going to push back. Should I be worried? About them? No. About the facility workers feeling pressured by community members to defend Walsh? Maybe. Watch for that. Victoria paused. Brooks, you're doing exactly what I sent you to do. Don't let threats, subtle or otherwise, change your approach. Hale Industries has resources to fight whatever Morrison and his friends try to throw at us. The weekend brought unexpected complications. Several workers called in sick on Saturday. A shift that should have had full staffing was suddenly short. Tom suspected pressure from Walsh's supporters, but couldn't prove it. Ethan spent Saturday on the factory floor himself, working alongside the reduced crew, learning their jobs firsthand. By Sunday, the atmosphere had shifted again. Word had spread about the new guy from corporate who'd spent an entire shift running machinery and hadn't complained once about the work. When Monday arrived, staffing was back to normal, and something new had appeared in workers' expressions when they looked at him: respect. The week progressed in a blur of 14-hour days. Equipment repairs continued. The new ventilation system's installation was scheduled. Job candidates were interviewed via video call, with Ethan insisting on speaking with each personally. Problems that had festered for years were cataloged, prioritized, and addressed one by one. But beneath the progress, Ethan felt the undercurrent of resistance. The two managers on administrative leave hadn't returned, but their allies remained, people who'd benefited from the old system and resented the changes. Small acts of sabotage began appearing. Tools went missing. Maintenance schedules got accidentally deleted. Equipment that had been repaired suddenly developed new problems. Tom confirmed it on Thursday night as they reviewed the week's incidents. Someone's trying to make you look bad. Make it seem like your changes are causing more problems than they're solving. Then we document everything and keep moving forward. Ethan pulled up the security camera footage that had been one of his first installation orders. And we start catching whoever's responsible. The footage revealed one of Walsh's former associates deliberately damaging a conveyor belt motor that had just been repaired. Ethan had him escorted off the property Friday morning with the same efficiency Walsh had received. By Friday afternoon, as Ethan prepared to return to Portland, the facility felt different, not perfect, far from it. Problems remained that would take months to fully resolve. But the trajectory had changed. Workers moved with more purpose. Safety violations were being reported. Equipment that had been neglected was receiving attention. Susan walked him to his rental car, her expression thoughtful. You know what you did here? Started fixing what was broken? You gave us permission to expect better, to believe this place matters. She extended her hand. Thank you for not treating us like we were disposable. You never were disposable. Someone just forgot to tell you that. Ethan shook her hand. I'll be back in 3 weeks. Keep the progress going. Call me if you need anything, and I mean anything. You have my direct number. The drive to the airport took him past downtown, a collection of storefronts that had seen better decades, a diner that probably served as the town's social center, a high school that fed its graduates directly into factory jobs or military service. This was the America that people forgot existed when they talked about economic progress and corporate success. These were the communities that bore the cost when efficiency meant cutting corners and maximizing profit meant minimizing care. Ethan's flight back to Portland gave him time to write his report, not the sanitized corporate version that made everything sound manageable, but the honest assessment Victoria had asked for. The facility could be saved, but it required sustained investment and management oversight. The cultural problems ran deeper than equipment failures, and the resistance from local power structures meant this fight wasn't over. When he landed, Maya and Mrs. Chen were waiting at arrivals. Maya ran to him and he scooped her up, ignoring his protesting shoulder that still hadn't fully healed from the bridge. "Did you save Idaho?" Maya asked. "I started to, still more work to do." He set her down. "But yeah, I think we're going to save it." Victoria called that night after Maya was asleep. "I read your report. It's more honest than anything corporate has received in years." "Is that good or bad?" "It's necessary. The board meeting is Tuesday. I'm presenting your findings and recommendations. They're not going to like the price tag. $2 million over 18 months to fully restore the facility to proper condition," Ethan said. "I know it's a lot, but it's less than we'd lose if the facility closes or continues declining." "You made that case clearly." Victoria's voice softened. "You did good work this week, Brooks. Better than I expected, and my expectations were already high." After they hung up, Ethan stood at his apartment window looking out at Portland's lights. He'd been operations manager for 1 week. In that time, he'd exposed corruption, fired corrupt management, authorized hundreds of thousands in repairs, given 230 workers reason to hope, and made enemies among small-town power brokers who weren't used to being challenged. And somehow, impossibly, it felt like he was finally doing what he was meant to do. His phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Workers voted unanimously to name the new ventilation system the Brooks system. Thought you should know. Ethan smiled in the darkness. He'd spent 3 years feeling invisible, believing the world had forgotten people like him existed. Now his name would be on equipment keeping Idaho workers safe. It wasn't the kind of recognition that came with awards or promotions. It was better. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. on Tuesday, which gave Ethan exactly enough time to drop Maya at school, change into his best suit, and arrive at Hale Industries with his stomach in knots. Victoria had asked him to attend to present his findings directly to the people who controlled the company's purse strings. It was an honor and a test, and Ethan understood that how he performed in the next 2 hours would determine whether Idaho got the resources it needed or became another casualty of corporate cost-cutting. Jennifer met him at the elevator with coffee and a sympathetic smile. "Board meetings are theater. Remember that. They're going to challenge you, question your numbers, ask why they should invest millions in a facility that's been declining for years. Don't take it personally. What if they decide it's not worth saving? Then Victoria will override them. She has controlling interest, but she'd prefer their support, which means you need to make them believe Idaho matters." Jennifer handed him a tablet with his presentation loaded. "You've got this. You walked into a corrupt facility and fixed it in a week. Talking to executives should be easy by comparison." It wasn't easy. The boardroom was all dark wood and intimidating formality, with 12 people seated around a table that probably cost more than Ethan's annual salary. Victoria sat at the head, immaculate in a charcoal suit, her expression giving nothing away. The others were older, men and women who'd built careers on quarterly reports and shareholder value, whose connection to manufacturing floors existed only through spreadsheets. Richard Fordham was there, looking uncomfortable in a way that suggested he knew what was coming. Patricia Chen sat beside him, her expression carefully neutral. The rest were strangers whose nameplates proclaimed titles like Chief Financial Officer and Director of Strategic Planning. Victoria opened with a summary of Idaho's situation, then turned the floor over to Ethan. He stood, feeling every eye assess him, judge him, find him wanting before he'd even spoken. 3 weeks ago, the Idaho facility was operating at 78% efficiency with a rising accident rate and declining employee morale. Management had been falsifying production records while stealing inventory. Workers were using equipment that should have been replaced years ago. The facility was dying, and nobody with the power to fix it seemed to care. He pulled up images on the screen, the cracked parking lot, the outdated safety equipment, the machinery held together with improvised repairs, then the falsified manifests, the evidence of theft, the documented safety violations. In my first week on site, I terminated the assistant facility manager for fraud, placed 2 others on administrative leave, and authorized immediate repairs totaling $270,000. The ventilation system replacement will cost an additional $180,000. Full facility restoration requires $2 million over 18 months. A man Ethan didn't recognize, the nameplate read James Whitmore, CFO, spoke up immediately. $2 million is a significant investment for a facility that's been underperforming. What's our return timeline? 18 months to reach 95% efficiency, 3 years to full ROI based on increased production capacity and reduced accident-related costs. And if we simply close the facility and consolidate production elsewhere? Ethan had expected this question but still felt anger flash through him. You'd save the $2 million investment. You'd also put 230 people out of work in a town of 4,000, destroy a community that depends on that facility, and lose the institutional knowledge of workers who've been there for decades. The hidden costs of closure, unemployment insurance, potential lawsuits, damage to Hale Industries' reputation in rural markets would likely exceed the investment you're trying to avoid. That's speculative. Whitmore's tone was dismissive. Hard numbers matter more than sentiment. Then let's talk hard numbers. Ethan pulled up a new slide. Idaho's facility at full efficiency can produce 15% more output than our Oregon plant at 30% lower labor costs. The building is paid for, the workforce is trained, and the location provides strategic access to distribution networks in 6 states. Closing it means losing that advantage permanently. Investing in it means gaining a competitive edge that compounds annually. Patricia leaned forward. Your report mentions ongoing resistance from local power structures, Councilman Morrison and others with connections to the terminated managers. How do we address that? We don't negotiate with people protecting corruption. Morrison called me trying to intimidate me into going easy on Walsh. I declined and reported the call to Victoria. If he or anyone else wants to make trouble, let them. We have documentation of everything. Ethan met Patricia's eyes. The only way to change a toxic culture is to refuse to participate in it. That means standing firm even when it's uncomfortable. Richard cleared his throat. Mr. Brooks, nobody here doubts your intentions, but you've been in this role for 3 weeks. Some of us have decades of experience watching promising initiatives fail because the person leading them didn't understand the full complexity of what they were attempting. How do we know this isn't another well-meaning effort that collapses once you're not personally present? It was a fair question, and Ethan respected Richard more for asking it directly. You don't know. You're taking a calculated risk based on limited data, but consider what we do know. In 1 week, I identified and terminated a theft operation that had been running for at least 6 months. I implemented immediate safety improvements that workers have already noticed. I hired a competent acting facility manager and gave her the authority to continue making progress. The question isn't whether I can fix Idaho personally, it's whether I've set systems in place that allow Idaho to fix itself. And have you? This from Victoria, her first direct question of the meeting. I believe so, yes. Susan Ortiz is capable and committed. Tom Hendricks has the workers' trust. The corrupt management is gone. Equipment repairs are scheduled. Safety protocols are being enforced. The foundation is solid. What Idaho needs now is consistent investment and oversight, not heroic intervention. A woman Ethan hadn't heard speak yet, her nameplate read Catherine Yu, Director of Operations, leaned back in her chair. I've reviewed your background, Mr. Brooks. Cascade Manufacturing, where you worked before, closed because of exactly the kind of deferred maintenance and management negligence you found in Idaho. You watched that failure happen. Is this about fixing Idaho or about not letting history repeat itself? The question cut deeper than Catherine probably intended. Ethan thought about his father coming home from Cascade year after year, complaining about equipment that didn't work right, safety violations that got ignored, managers who cared more about bonuses than people. He thought about the day the closure was announced, and how his father had sat at their kitchen table with his head in his hands because after 30 years of loyalty, the company had decided he was expendable. It's both, Ethan said quietly. Idaho is Cascade all over again. Good workers being failed by management that stopped caring. The difference is that Cascade was owned by a corporation that decided closure was easier than investment. Hale Industries is owned by someone who still believes facilities like Idaho matter. So yes, this is personal, but that doesn't make it wrong. Silence settled over the room. Catherine nodded slowly, something like approval in her expression. Whitmore wasn't satisfied. Personal investment doesn't guarantee success. It often leads to throwing good money after bad because someone can't admit a situation is unsalvageable. You're right. Ethan pulled up his final slide, a comparison of Idaho's metrics against 3 other Hale facilities. But the data supports investment. Idaho's decline is recent and reversible. Equipment failures are fixable. Workforce capability is proven. The facility isn't dying because it can't succeed. It's dying because nobody tried to save it. There's a difference. Victoria stood. I've heard enough. The board will vote on the proposed Idaho investment package. $2 million over 18 months with quarterly progress reviews. Those in favor? 8 hands went up, including Richard's and Patricia's. 4 abstained. None voted against. The motion carries. Victoria's smile was slight but genuine. Mr. Brooks, you're authorized to implement your recommendations. Quarterly reviews begin in 3 months. Don't make me regret this. The meeting adjourned, and Ethan found himself surrounded by board members asking follow-up questions, offering cautious support, or in Whitmore's case, warning him that failure would be remembered. Through it all, Victoria watched from across the room with an expression Ethan couldn't quite read. When the crowd finally cleared, she approached. Walk with me. They took the private elevator to the roof access, a feature Ethan hadn't known existed. The rooftop garden was carefully maintained, with benches positioned to take advantage of the view. Victoria led him to one overlooking the river, the same river that ran past Idaho's facility 200 miles away. You did well in there, she said. Better than most executives with 10 times your experience. Do you know why? Because I actually care about Idaho. Because you didn't pretend to have all the answers. You acknowledged uncertainty while defending your decisions. That takes confidence most people don't have. Victoria turned to face him. But caring isn't enough. Not for what's coming. What do you mean? Whitmore is going to watch Idaho like a hawk, looking for any excuse to prove he was right about closure being the better option. Richard is going to question every decision you make, testing whether you can handle sustained pressure. And the people in Idaho who benefited from Walsh's corruption aren't going to forgive you for exposing them. Victoria's voice was serious. You made enemies this month, Brooks. Powerful ones. They're going to push back, and when they do, it won't be obvious sabotage. It'll be whisper campaigns, subtle undermining, making your job impossible while maintaining plausible deniability. So what do I do? You keep showing up. You keep making the right calls. And you remember that integrity is a long game. It doesn't always win the daily battles, but it tends to win the war. She paused. I'm promoting you. Ethan stared at her. I've been here 3 weeks, and in that time, you've proven you can identify problems, implement solutions, and handle resistance from multiple directions. Director of Operations, effective immediately. Salary increases to $130,000. You'll oversee all our manufacturing facilities with authority to implement improvements across the board. Victoria, Ethan struggled to process what she was saying. That's Richard's job. Richard is being moved to an advisory role. He's excellent at strategy, but terrible at execution. You're the opposite. Victoria's expression was gentle but firm. This isn't charity. This is recognition that you have skills we need, but it also means Idaho is now one of 6 facilities you're responsible for. Think you can handle it? Ethan thought about Maya, about the promise he'd made to give her a stable life, about the workers in Idaho who were counting on him to follow through, about his father who'd spent 30 years in a facility that eventually threw him away, about the choice he'd made on a bridge in the rain because someone needed help and he couldn't walk past. "Yes," he said, "I can handle it." "Good. Jennifer will arrange the paperwork. You start the new role next Monday." Victoria stood. "One more thing. I'm assigning you an assistant, someone to help manage the logistics of overseeing multiple facilities. Her name is Lisa Tran. She's brilliant, and she'll keep you organized when things get chaotic." The promotion became public that afternoon, and the reactions were exactly what Ethan expected. Jennifer congratulated him warmly. Patricia sent a careful email acknowledging his success. Richard requested a meeting that was scheduled for Thursday, and the anonymous complaint started immediately. The first came through HR, a claim that Ethan had shown favoritism in Idaho hiring decisions, selecting candidates based on personal preference rather than qualifications. Jennifer flagged it as likely false but requiring investigation. The second accused him of financial impropriety, suggesting he'd authorized unnecessary repairs to inflate his perceived impact. This one went directly to Whitmore, who forwarded it to Victoria with a note requesting a full audit. The third was a letter to the local newspaper in Idaho, signed by concerned community members, claiming that Ethan had destroyed good people's reputations based on flimsy evidence and corporate bias against small-town values. Victoria called him into her office Wednesday morning with printouts of all three. "This is the pushback I warned you about. Walsh's allies are coordinating an attack. How do you want to handle it?" Ethan read through the complaints carefully, noting the similarities in phrasing that suggested a single source. "The hiring favoritism claim is easy to disprove. I have interview notes and qualification assessments for every candidate. The financial impropriety accusation is baseless. Every repair I authorized was documented with photos and maintenance reports showing actual equipment failure. The newspaper letter is harder because it's not making specific claims, just spreading general doubt. So we respond to the first two officially and ignore the third? No. We respond to all three by continuing to do good work." Ethan set down the papers. "People are going to believe what they want to believe. If we spend all our time defending against accusations, we look defensive. If we focus on results, the accusations become noise." Victoria smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that. The board is watching how you handle this. So is everyone else in the company." The HR investigation took 3 days and concluded that all hiring decisions were properly documented and justified. The financial audit took a week and found that every expense Ethan had authorized was legitimate and necessary. The newspaper letter generated some local controversy but ultimately faded when Susan and Tom publicly defended Ethan's work. But the attacks didn't stop. They just got more personal. On Thursday afternoon, Ethan received a call from Maya's school. The principal, Mrs. Davidson, requested an immediate meeting. When Ethan arrived, he found Maya sitting in the office with red-rimmed eyes, looking small and scared. "What happened?" Mrs. Davidson gestured to her office. Once inside with the door closed, she pulled out a folder. Maya got into an altercation during lunch. Another student made comments about her family situation, and Maya responded physically. "She hit someone?" "She pushed another girl who was saying..." Mrs. Davidson consulted her notes. "That Maya's father only has a job because he kissed up to his boss. The other girl claimed her father works at some factory and knows all about it." Cold anger settled in Ethan's chest. Walsh's friends, attacking through their children, using 9-year-olds as weapons because they couldn't hurt him directly. "What's the other girl's name?" "I can't share that. But Mr. Brooks, this is Maya's second physical incident this year. Our policy requires a 3-day suspension. For defending herself against bullying, for using physical force instead of reporting the problem to a teacher." Mrs. Davidson's tone was sympathetic but firm. "I understand Maya was provoked, but we can't make exceptions, even when the circumstances are understandable." Ethan looked through the office window at Maya, who was crying silently now. 3 days of suspension would go on her record. Future teachers would see it, judge her, make assumptions about the kind of student she was. All because someone had decided to hurt him through his daughter. "I'd like to speak with the other girl's parents," Ethan said carefully. "That's not..." Please, I think there's more going on here than a simple playground dispute. If the other student was repeating things her parents said, that's an adult problem, not a child problem. Mrs. Davidson hesitated, then picked up her phone. 20 minutes later, Ethan found himself in a conference room with a couple in their 40s who introduced themselves as Tom and Sarah Brennan. Tom worked maintenance at Idaho's facility. Sarah taught at the local elementary school. I understand your daughter said some things to Maya today, Ethan began. Kids say things. Tom's voice was defensive. If your daughter can't handle a little teasing, your daughter told mine that I only have a job because I kissed up to my boss.
Where did she hear that phrase?
Silence. Sarah looked uncomfortable. Tom's jaw tightened. My daughter repeats what she hears at home, Tom said finally. And what she hears is that Derek Walsh, a good man who did right by this town for 15 years, got fired by some outsider who showed up and decided he knew better than everyone else. Derek Walsh stole $300,000 from Hale Industries while workers like you dealt with failing equipment. The evidence is documented and has been turned over to law enforcement. Ethan kept his voice level. Your loyalty to him is understandable. He was your manager for years. But loyalty doesn't change facts. Facts according to who? You? Some guy from Portland who spent a week in Idaho and thinks he understands how things work? Tom leaned forward. Derek took care of people. He made sure loyal workers got overtime, got good shifts, got taken care of when times were tough. You fired him and replaced him with someone who follows rules instead of looking out for people. Susan Ortiz follows rules because rules exist to protect workers. Derek broke rules to line his own pockets while people like you suffered the consequences. Ethan pulled out his phone and showed Tom the photos of damaged equipment, safety violations, deferred maintenance. This is what Derek's taking care of people looked like. This is what he prioritized while stealing inventory. Tom stared at the photos. Some of the anger drained from his face, replaced by something more complicated. I didn't know it was that bad, he said quietly. Because Derek made sure you didn't know. He falsified reports, hid problems, and convinced people like you that he was protecting you when he was actually protecting himself. Ethan put his phone away. I'm not asking you to like me. I'm not asking you to believe I'm better than Derek. I'm asking you to look at what's actually happening. Equipment is getting fixed, safety violations are being addressed, the facility is getting the investment it needed for years. Judge me by results, not by loyalty to someone who betrayed you. Sarah spoke for the first time, her voice thoughtful. The new ventilation system, that's real? Being installed next month. Workers voted to name it the Brooks System, which is more recognition than I deserve, but appreciated nonetheless. Tom and Sarah exchanged glances. Some silent communication passed between them. I'll talk to Jenny, Tom said. Make sure she understands that what happened with Derek is complicated, and she shouldn't repeat things without understanding the full story. I'd appreciate that. And I'll talk to Maya about responding to provocation without using her hands. Ethan stood. For what it's worth, I understand defending someone you thought was looking out for you. That's loyalty, and loyalty matters. Just make sure it's directed at people who deserve it. The meeting with Mrs. Davidson afterward resulted in reduced suspension, 1 day instead of 3, with the understanding that both girls had contributed to the situation. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than Ethan had hoped. On the drive home, Maya was quiet until they were almost at their apartment. Daddy, am I in trouble? You're suspended for a day, so yes, but I understand why you did it. Ethan glanced at her in the rearview mirror. That girl said mean things about me, and you wanted to defend me. That shows loyalty, and I'm proud of that. But using your hands isn't the answer, even when someone is being cruel. What should I have done? Walked away. Told a teacher. Come home and told me so I could address it with the adults who were really responsible. He pulled into their apartment complex. Maya, some people are going to say bad things about me. That's part of my job now, making decisions that not everyone likes. You can't fight everyone who disagrees with me. But they were lying. You're not a kiss-up. You're brave and good, and you help people. Ethan's throat tightened. Thank you, baby. But here's something important. You don't have to defend me to prove you love me. I know you love me, and I'd rather you stayed safe and out of trouble than got hurt trying to protect my reputation. They spent the evening together making dinner and watching a movie, both of them carefully not talking about the harder truths that hung in the air, that Ethan's promotion had made them targets, that Maya would hear more cruel things from children parroting parents who resented change, that success came with costs that 9-year-olds shouldn't have to pay. Later that night, after Maya was asleep, Ethan stood at their kitchen window and wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. The promotion was everything he'd worked for: financial security, professional recognition, the ability to give Maya a better life. But it had also painted a target on both their backs. The attacks would continue, would probably escalate, and Maya would be caught in the crossfire. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Heard about Maya's school incident. I'm sorry. This is my fault for putting you in a position that makes you vulnerable to retaliation. Ethan typed back, not your fault. You gave me an opportunity. What people do with their resentment is their choice, not yours. Victoria's response came immediately. Still, if you need anything, legal support, security, help with school, just ask. He appreciated the offer but knew he wouldn't take it. This was his problem to solve, his daughter to protect. Accepting too much help felt like admitting he couldn't handle the responsibilities he'd accepted. But the gesture mattered. Friday brought better news. The quarterly production reports from Idaho showed efficiency had climbed to 84% in just 3 weeks. Safety incidents were down 40%. Worker satisfaction surveys, newly implemented, showed marked improvement in morale. The numbers told the story Ethan had believed was possible, that people worked better when they felt valued, when equipment functioned properly, when management actually cared. Richard requested their scheduled meeting that afternoon. Ethan arrived at his office expecting tension, but found something more complicated. Richard gestured to a chair and poured 2 cups of coffee before sitting down. I owe you an apology, Richard said without preamble. I've been resistant to your promotion because I saw it as a threat. Someone younger, less experienced, getting recognition I felt I'd earned through decades of work. That's understandable. It's also wrong. Richard took a sip of coffee. I've spent the past week reviewing everything you've done. Idaho, the board presentation, how you've handled the attacks. You're not trying to replace me. You're doing a job I was never suited for. I'm good at strategy, at seeing big picture patterns. You're good at execution, at taking those patterns and making them real. We complement each other then. We do. Which is why I'd like to suggest we work together rather than in competition. I'll handle strategic planning and board relations. You'll handle facility operations and implementation. Victoria gets both our strengths without our weaknesses undermining each other. Ethan extended his hand. I'd like that. Richard shook it, and something that had been tense between them since Ethan's first day finally relaxed. They spent the next hour discussing the other facilities, identifying problems that mirrored Idaho's situation, planning how to address them systematically rather than through crisis intervention. When Ethan finally left Richard's office, Lisa Tran was waiting, a woman in her late 20s with efficient energy and a tablet already loaded with his schedule for the following week. She fell into step beside him as they walked toward his office. You're overbooked on Tuesday and have a conflict on Wednesday, she said without greeting. I've moved the production review to Thursday and rescheduled the Oregon facility visit for next month. Your daughter has a parent-teacher conference on the 15th. I've blocked your calendar. And you need to approve equipment purchases for 3 facilities by Monday. How do you know about Maya's conference? Mrs. Chen called. She's excellent, by the way. Very organized, very protective of your time. I've coordinated with her, so we're not double booking you. Lisa looked up from her tablet. My job is to make your job possible. That means managing logistics, anticipating problems, and making sure you're not drowning in administrative tasks when you should be focusing on operations. Questions? Just one. How did you know about the equipment purchases? Patricia flagged them yesterday. I reviewed the requests, confirmed they aligned with your Idaho protocols, and prepared approval documents. They're on your desk, ready for signature. Lisa smiled. I've been studying everything you've done since you started. Your approach is different from previous directors. You prioritize worker safety and facility investment over short-term efficiency gains. It's working. I want to help you scale it across all our operations. Ethan realized Victoria had chosen his assistant carefully, someone who understood what he was trying to accomplish and believed in it enough to make it her mission too. It felt like being given a gift he hadn't known he needed.
The weekend passed in a blur of Maya's activities and preparation for the week ahead.
On Sunday evening, Ethan received an unexpected call from Tom Hendricks in Idaho. "Brooks, wanted you to hear this from me. The ventilation system installation started yesterday. Workers are already noticing the difference. Temperature on the floor dropped 15 degrees. People are talking about how maybe things really are changing. That's good to hear. There's more. Tom Brennan, the guy whose daughter gave Maya trouble, he came to me Friday. Said he'd been wrong about you, about Walsh, about a lot of things. He's telling people to give you a fair chance. It's shifting opinion." Ethan felt something unclench in his chest. "I appreciate you letting me know. You stood up for us when nobody else would. Least I can do is make sure you know it's making a difference." Tom paused. "This place is starting to feel like it matters again. Like we matter. That's because of you." After they hung up, Ethan sat in the dark living room of their apartment and felt the weight of everything settle into something approaching acceptance. The attacks would continue. Walsh's allies weren't going to give up easily. The pressure would increase. 6 facilities were more responsibility than he'd ever carried. Maya would face more difficult moments as children repeated their parents' resentments. But he'd also proven something to himself. That doing the right thing, even when it was hard, even when it cost him, led somewhere worth going. That integrity wasn't weakness, but leverage. That showing up and caring and refusing to compromise on things that mattered could actually change situations that seemed hopeless. His phone showed a photo of Maya from that afternoon, grinning at the camera with chocolate ice cream on her nose. She was happy, safe, proud of her father. Everything he'd fought for, everything he'd risked, came down to that simple truth. She was going to be okay because he'd made choices that prioritized the right things over the easy things. The bridge felt like a lifetime ago, but Ethan understood now that the choice he'd made that rainy morning had set everything else in motion. Not because saving Victoria's life had earned him a job, but because it had revealed to him who he was when everything was at stake. Someone who ran toward trouble instead of away from it. Someone who protected the vulnerable and challenged the powerful. Someone who believed people mattered more than systems, and systems existed to serve people, not the other way around. Idaho was just the beginning. 5 more facilities waited, each with their own problems, their own corrupt managers, their own workers who'd stopped believing anyone cared. And Ethan was going to save them all, one difficult decision at a time, because that's what he did now. He was the person who showed up when nobody else would. And that was enough. 6 months passed like a storm that eventually learned to become weather. Intense at first, then gradually settling into patterns that felt almost normal. Ethan stood in his new office on a crisp April morning, looking out at Portland waking up beneath a sky scrubbed clean by overnight rain, and marveled at how different everything felt from that desperate drive across the Morrison Bridge. The office itself was twice the size of his first one, with windows on 2 walls and furniture that Lisa had selected with her characteristic efficiency. Photos lined one bookshelf now. Maya at her school science fair, the Idaho workers gathered around their new ventilation system, the ribbon-cutting ceremony at the Oregon facility after its safety overhaul. Each image represented a battle won, a problem solved, a group of people who'd stopped being invisible. "You're here early." Victoria appeared in his doorway with 2 coffee cups, handing him one before settling into the chair across from his desk. "Couldn't sleep?" "Maya had a nightmare. Took an hour to calm her down." Ethan sipped the coffee, grateful for the warmth. "She's been having them more frequently. School counselor thinks it's delayed stress from everything that happened last fall." "The bullying incident?" "That and watching me work 80-hour weeks trying to fix 6 facilities simultaneously while people actively tried to make me fail." Ethan set down his cup. "She's 9. She shouldn't have to worry about whether her father's job is secure or whether other kids are going to repeat their parents' resentments." Victoria was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "I've been meaning to talk to you about that, about balance and sustainability. You've accomplished more in 6 months than most directors achieve in years, but you're burning out. I can see it. I'm fine."
You're not fine. You're exhausted. You've lost weight.
Lisa tells me you're in the office before 6 most mornings and rarely leave before 8 at night. That's not sustainable, Brooks. Not for you, and definitely not for Maya. Ethan wanted to argue, but recognized the truth in Victoria's words. The past 6 months had been a controlled drowning, constant travel between facilities, endless meetings, fighting resistance from entrenched managers who resented change, dealing with sabotage that ranged from subtle to blatant. He'd fixed Idaho, overhauled Oregon, cleaned up corruption in Nevada, and was halfway through similar transformations in Arizona, Utah, and Montana. Each facility had been its own war, complete with casualties and hard-won victories. The results were undeniable. Across all 6 facilities, efficiency had increased an average of 18%. Safety incidents were down 43%. Worker satisfaction scores had climbed from abysmal to respectable. 3 corrupt managers had been terminated, 2 had resigned before they could be fired, and 1 was currently facing criminal charges. Hale Industries was saving money, producing more, and actually treating workers like human beings instead of replaceable components. But the cost had been brutal. Ethan's personal life had shrunk to nearly nothing. Work and Maya, with barely any space for anything else. He'd missed 2 of her school events because of facility emergencies. He'd canceled 3 dinners with Mrs. Chen because meetings ran late. He'd gone entire weeks speaking to his daughter only in the mornings before school and the brief hour before her bedtime. "I'll cut back," Ethan said. "Delegate more. Lisa keeps telling me I don't have to personally oversee every implementation." "She's right, but cutting back isn't enough. You need help." Victoria pulled out her tablet. "I'm hiring 2 additional operations directors. They'll each take 3 facilities, reporting to you but handling day-to-day management. You'll maintain oversight and handle the complex problems, but you won't be trying to be 6 places at once. That's a significant expense. It's a necessary investment. I need you for the long term, Brooks. That means making sure you don't collapse from exhaustion before you're 40. Victoria smiled slightly. "Besides, the board is actually happy with you now. Even Whitmore admitted last month that your approach is working. That's practically a declaration of love from him." Ethan couldn't help but laugh. "He told me the Idaho numbers were surprisingly acceptable for preliminary results. I think that's the nicest thing he's ever said to anyone." "It is, and it represents a significant shift. 6 months ago, half the board wanted to close facilities and consolidate. Now they're asking if we should acquire more. You changed the conversation from how do we minimize losses to how do we maximize potential." The weight of that accomplishment settled over Ethan. He'd come to Hale Industries with nothing but desperation and a willingness to work hard. Now he was reshaping how a major corporation thought about its workers and its facilities. It felt impossible and inevitable at the same time. "When do the new directors start?" "Interviews begin next week. I want your input on candidates. You'll be working closely with them, so you need people you trust." Victoria stood. "And Brooks? Take a week off. Actual time off, not working remotely. Take Maya somewhere. Remember that she's the reason you're doing all of this." After Victoria left, Ethan sat alone with his coffee and the morning light and the photos that documented 6 months of impossible work. He pulled out his phone and texted Lisa. "Block my calendar for the 2nd week of May. Full week. No exceptions." Her response came immediately. "Finally, I've been preparing for this. Already have coverage arranged for all facilities." "Where are you going?" Ethan thought about Maya's constant request to see the ocean, about how she'd never been further from Portland than their brief trip to his parents' graves 2 years ago. "Beach? Somewhere quiet? Suggestions?" "Cannon Beach. I'll book you a cottage. You're going to relax if I have to schedule it into your calendar." The morning passed in meetings, production reviews, budget discussions, a video call with Susan in Idaho about expansion plans. The facility there had become Hale Industries' highest performing plant, exceeding targets 3 months running. Other corporations were taking notice. Ethan had fielded 2 recruitment offers in the past month, both promising more money and prestige than he currently had. He'd declined both without serious consideration. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about finishing what he'd started, about proving that corporations could succeed while treating workers with dignity. At noon, Patricia stopped by his office with news that shifted everything. Montana just called. Brett Morrison, the facility manager, was in a car accident this morning. He's stable, but will be out for at least 3 months. We need someone on site immediately. Montana was their most troubled facility, the one Ethan had been saving for last because its problems ran deeper than equipment or corrupt management. The facility was haunted by a tragedy from 5 years earlier, when a worker had died in an accident that subsequent investigation revealed was entirely preventable. The workforce had never recovered. Productivity was terrible. Morale was worse. And Brett Morrison, while honest and well-intentioned, had been overwhelmed trying to manage a facility that needed trauma healing before it could accept operational improvements. "I'll go," Ethan said, already mentally rearranging his schedule. "Brooks, you can't keep doing this." Patricia's voice was firm. "You're not a firefighter anymore. You're a director. Send someone else." "Who?" "Everyone capable is already managing their own crisis. Montana needs someone with authority and experience, someone the workers will actually listen to." Ethan pulled up the facility files. "I'll leave tomorrow morning. Lisa can coordinate everything." Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but recognized the futility. "Victoria's not going to like this. She just told you to take time off." "I'll take time off after Montana is stable." Even as Ethan said it, he knew how it sounded, like an addict promising to quit after one more fix. But Montana couldn't wait. The facility was teetering on the edge of closure, and Brett's accident had just pushed it closer to falling. That evening, Ethan broke the news to Maya over dinner. She set down her fork with careful precision, her face doing that thing where she tried very hard not to cry. "How long?" 2 weeks, maybe 3. Mrs. Chen will stay with you. I'll call every night." Ethan reached across their small kitchen table and took her hand. "I know this isn't fair. I know I promised we'd go to the beach in May. We can go when you get back." Maya's voice was small. "It's okay, Daddy. I understand." But she didn't understand, not really. How could she? She was 9 years old and her father kept disappearing to fix factories while she learned to fall asleep alone in an apartment that was nicer now, but still felt empty without him. "Maya, look at me." Ethan waited until she met his eyes. "I'm going to fix this. Not just Montana, the whole situation. I'm going to hire people to help so I don't have to travel constantly. And then we're going to the beach, and I'm going to turn my phone off for an entire week. And we're going to build sandcastles and find starfish and do absolutely nothing productive. Promise?" "Promise." Ethan squeezed her hand. "I love you more than any job, any factory, any success. You know that, right?" "I know." Maya squeezed back. "I just wish the factories didn't need you so much." That night, after Maya was asleep, Ethan packed for Montana while doubt gnawed at him. Victoria was right. This pace was unsustainable. Patricia was right. He couldn't keep responding to every crisis personally. Even Maya, in her 9-year-old way, was right. The factories needed him too much because he'd made himself indispensable instead of building systems that could function without him. But Montana needed him now, and he couldn't ignore that need any more than he could have ignored Victoria on the bridge. Some people ran toward trouble. That was just who they were. The flight to Montana left at 6 a.m. Lisa had arranged everything with characteristic efficiency. Rental car, hotel reservations, meetings scheduled with the facility's senior staff. Ethan landed in Billings by 9 and was walking the factory floor by 11. The facility felt different from the others. Not neglected exactly. Equipment was maintained, safety protocols were visible, the building was clean. But there was a heaviness in the air, a weight that went beyond normal workplace stress. Workers moved through their tasks with mechanical precision, speaking only when necessary, avoiding eye contact. It felt like a funeral that had been going on for 5 years. "Mr. Brooks." A woman in her 30s approached, extending her hand. "Diane Foster, acting facility manager while Brett recovers. Thank you for coming so quickly." "How is Brett?" "Stable. Broken leg, concussion, some internal bruising. He'll recover fully, but it'll take months." Diane's expression was strained. "I've been assistant manager for 3 years. I know how things work here, but I don't have Brett's credibility with the workers. They respected him because he was trying, even when nothing seemed to help." "Tell me about the accident 5 years ago." Diane's face closed down. "I wasn't here yet. I only know what I've heard. A worker died when equipment failed. Investigation found negligence. The facility manager at the time resigned. Brett was brought in to clean things up, but the damage was done. We've never recovered. I need to talk to people who were here, who knew the worker who died. Mr. Brooks, I don't think... Diane, this facility isn't failing because of equipment or management. It's failing because nobody ever addressed the trauma. You can't build progress on unhealed wounds. Ethan gestured at the factory floor. Those workers don't trust that their safety matters. They're just going through motions, waiting for the next disaster. Until we fix that, nothing else matters. Diane was quiet for a long moment. Jack Reeves was the victim's supervisor. He still works here, press operator on second shift. If anyone will talk to you, it's him. Ethan spent the day reviewing operations and meeting with staff, but his mind kept returning to the conversation ahead. At 3 p.m., he met Jack Reeves in the break room, a man in his late 50s with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much loss. "You're from corporate," Jack said without preamble, "here to decide whether it's worth keeping us open. I'm here to understand what happened and what needs to happen next." Ethan sat across from him. "Tell me about Daniel Cortez." Jack's expression shifted through surprise, pain, and something like relief. "Nobody from corporate has said Danny's name in 5 years. You all just called him the victim or the deceased worker." That was wrong. He was a person. He deserves to be remembered as one. Danny was 26, married, 2 little kids. He worked here for 4 years. Good worker, never complained, always showed up. Jack's voice was rough. The day he died, he was operating a press that had been flagged for maintenance 3 times. Previous manager kept putting it off because shutting it down would hurt production numbers. Danny knew it was dangerous, but he had bills to pay, kids to feed, so he kept working. And the equipment failed. Catastrophically. Danny was killed instantly. OSHA investigation found a dozen violations: deferred maintenance, inadequate safety protocols, management ignoring worker concerns. Previous manager was forced out. Brett came in promising things would be different, and they were, mostly. But the workers never forgot that Danny died because someone decided production mattered more than his life. Ethan felt sick. This was Cascade all over again. His father's complaints about equipment made real in the worst possible way. What happened to his family? Maria, his wife, got a settlement, moved away with the kids. We never heard from her again. Jack looked at Ethan directly. "You want to know why this facility can't recover? Because every worker here knows they're expendable. Danny proved it. And until that changes, we're just waiting for the next disaster." "What if I told you I could change it?" "I'd say you're the 5th person from corporate to promise that. None of the others delivered. I'm not asking you to believe me based on promises. I'm asking you to watch what I do and judge accordingly." Ethan pulled out his tablet and showed Jack the photos from Idaho. Before and after, the transformation documented in images that told stories of care and investment. "This is what I've done at 5 other facilities. Equipment replaced, safety improved, workers treated like they matter. I can do the same here." Jack studied the photos for a long time. "Why? We're just factory workers. We're disposable to people like you." "No, you're not. And anyone who thinks you are doesn't deserve to run facilities where people's lives depend on equipment functioning correctly." Ethan closed his tablet. "Jack, I can't bring Danny back. I can't undo what happened. But I can make sure it never happens again. I can create a facility where safety actually comes first, where workers' concerns are heard, where equipment is maintained properly because people matter more than production targets." That's a nice speech. It's not a speech. It's a commitment. And I'm going to prove it by starting tomorrow. Ethan stood. "I need you to help me. You have credibility with the workers. They'll believe you when they won't believe me. Help me understand what needs to change, and I'll make it happen." Jack was quiet for a long moment, searching Ethan's face for something. Finally, he nodded. "All right, but the first thing you need to do is talk to Maria Cortez. She deserves to know someone finally cares about what happened to Danny." Finding Maria took 2 days of research and phone calls. She'd moved to Helena, working as a medical billing specialist, raising Danny's children, now teenagers, alone. When Ethan called and explained who he was, her initial response was cold. "I got the settlement. I signed the papers. I'm not interested in reopening old wounds for corporate PR purposes. This isn't PR. It's an apology that's 5 years overdue. Ethan kept his voice gentle. Your husband died because people made choices that prioritized profit over his safety. Nobody from Hale Industries has ever acknowledged that directly to you. I'd like to change that, if you'll let me. Silence on the line, then. You'll drive 2 hours each way just to apologize? Yes, tomorrow if you're available. Maria lived in a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. She met Ethan at the door with visible suspicion, but invited him inside. Photos of Danny covered the walls, wedding pictures, children's birthdays, holidays, a life documented in frozen moments that had ended too soon. Thank you for seeing me, Ethan began. I'm still not sure why I agreed. Maria sat across from him, her posture defensive. The settlement was fair, the investigation was thorough. What more is there to say? That we're sorry. That what happened to Danny was preventable and inexcusable. That Hale Industries failed him, failed you, failed your children. Ethan met her eyes. No amount of money changes that, but you deserve to hear someone from the company acknowledge it directly. Maria's expression shifted. In 5 years, nobody has said that. The lawyers talked about liability. The investigators talked about violations. The settlement negotiators talked about compensation. But nobody just said they were sorry that my husband is dead because someone decided quarterly reports mattered more than his life. I'm sorry. On behalf of Hale Industries, on behalf of every person who made choices that led to Danny's death, I'm profoundly sorry. Ethan pulled out a folder. I've spent the past 2 days reviewing the investigation reports, understanding exactly what failed. The facility has made some improvements since Danny died, but not enough. I'm here to change that. Why should I believe you? Ethan showed her the same photos he'd shown Jack, Idaho, Oregon, Nevada, the systematic transformation of facilities that had been failing. Because I've done it before. Because I have a daughter Maya's age, and I can't imagine what you've gone through, but I know I'd want someone to make sure my sacrifice meant something. Danny's death revealed problems that existed across Hale Industries. I'm fixing those problems. Not because of the settlement or the investigation, but because it's right. Maria looked at the photos for a long time. When she looked up, her eyes were wet. My kids ask about their father. They want to know if his death mattered, if it changed anything. What do I tell them? Tell them their father's death forced Hale Industries to confront failures we'd been ignoring. Tell them I'm personally overseeing changes to every facility we operate to make sure what happened to Danny never happens to anyone else. Tell them he mattered, and his loss is driving improvements that will protect thousands of workers. Ethan paused. And tell them that if they ever want to see what's been done in their father's name, I'll arrange a tour of any facility they choose. Maria wiped her eyes. The settlement money paid for college funds. Both kids want to be engineers. They want to make things safer, better. Danny would have loved that. He should be here to see it. Yes, he should. Maria stood, and Ethan stood with her. Thank you for coming, for caring enough to drive here just to apologize. It matters more than you know. On the drive back to Billings, Ethan called Victoria and briefed her on the situation. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. You went to see the widow, she said finally. That wasn't necessary. The settlement closed that chapter. The settlement closed the legal chapter. The human chapter was still wide open. Ethan watched Montana countryside roll past. The facility can't heal until we acknowledge what happened and commit to preventing it from happening again. Maria needed to hear that. The workers need to hear it, and frankly, Hale Industries needs to say it. What are you proposing? A memorial. Something permanent at the facility honoring Danny and recommitting us to worker safety. And a program. Annual safety reviews at every facility with worker input, ensuring we never defer maintenance or ignore concerns that could cost lives. Victoria was quiet again, thinking. The board won't like the expense. The board can deal with it. This isn't optional, Victoria. If you want Montana to succeed, if you want workers across all our facilities to trust that their safety actually matters, we need to do this publicly and permanently. You're right. Victoria's voice was firm. Draft a proposal. I'll present it to the board next week. And Brooks, you did good work today. The kind that matters more than production numbers. The memorial was installed 6 weeks later, a bronze plaque in Montana's main entrance with Danny's name, his dates, and a commitment. In memory of Daniel Cortez, whose loss reminds us that safety is not a goal, but a sacred obligation. No production target is worth a single life. We commit to honoring Danny's memory through unwavering dedication to protecting every person who works in this facility. The dedication ceremony brought Maria and her children, now 15 and 13. Jack Reeves spoke about Danny's character. Susan flew in from Idaho to represent the other facilities. Workers from all 3 shifts attended, filling the space beyond capacity. Ethan stood at the back, watching Maya hold Mrs. Chen's hand while Maria's son read a statement about his father. The boy's voice was strong, carrying the weight of someone who'd lost too much too young, but was determined to make that loss mean something. When the ceremony ended, workers approached Ethan one by one. Some shook his hand, some thanked him. One older man just nodded and said, "You kept your promise. That's rare." Montana's transformation took 3 months, but the trajectory was clear from the beginning. Efficiency climbed, safety incidents dropped. The heaviness that had haunted the facility began to lift as workers realized their concerns were being heard and addressed. Equipment was upgraded, protocols were strengthened, and slowly, painfully, the facility remembered how to hope. By July, when Ethan finally took that promised week at the beach with Maya, all 6 facilities were exceeding targets. The 2 new operations directors Victoria had hired were competent and committed, taking pressure off Ethan while maintaining the standards he'd established. Richard was handling board relations with renewed energy. Patricia had become an unexpected ally, defending Ethan's approaches when other executives questioned them. The cottage Lisa had booked was perfect. Small, quiet, with a deck overlooking the ocean. Maya spent the first day running between waves, collecting shells, building elaborate sandcastles that the tide would inevitably destroy. Ethan sat on the beach and turned off his phone and remembered what it felt like to simply exist without constantly solving problems. On the 3rd day, Victoria called. Ethan almost didn't answer, but the persistent ringing suggested it was important. "I know you're on vacation," she said, "but I need 5 minutes. Can you talk?" Ethan walked down the beach away from Maya. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Actually, something's very right." Victoria's voice carried excitement. "The board met yesterday. They've approved a comprehensive worker safety initiative across the entire corporation, modeled on what you implemented at our facilities. $2.5 million investment, annual safety reviews, worker advocacy committees, everything you've been pushing for, now company-wide policy." Ethan felt something unlock in his chest. They approved it? Unanimously. Even Whitmore voted yes. He actually said, and I quote, "Brooks has proven that treating workers well is sound business strategy, not charity." Coming from him, that's practically a love letter. What about Danny's program? Funded and expanding, every facility will have memorial commitments to workers lost in industrial accidents, with annual reviews ensuring we never forget the cost of negligence. Victoria paused. "You changed this company, Brooks. Fundamentally, the board sees it now." After they hung up, Ethan stood looking out at the Pacific and felt the weight of 6 months' impossible work finally settle into something like peace. He'd come to Hale Industries with nothing but desperation and a willingness to run into traffic when someone needed help. Now he'd transformed how a major corporation thought about its workers, saved facilities that were on the edge of closure, and created systems that would protect thousands of people he'd never meet. Maya ran up with a perfect sand dollar, holding it out like treasure. "Look what I found." Ethan knelt down and examined it with appropriate seriousness. "That's beautiful, baby. Should we take it home?" "Mrs. Chen says if you find something perfect on the beach, you should leave it there so someone else can find it too. But we can take a picture to remember." They took the picture, then carefully returned the sand dollar to the sand. Maya ran off toward the waves again, and Ethan watched her go. 9 years old, happy, safe, proud of her father who'd kept his promise to take her to the beach, even though factories needed saving. That evening, they built a fire in the cottage's fireplace and made s'mores while rain drummed on the roof. Maya talked about school, about her friends, about the science project she wanted to start in the fall. Ethan listened and asked questions and realized he couldn't remember the last time they'd had an entire evening with nothing else demanding his attention. "Daddy?"
Maya's voice was thoughtful. Are you happy? Yes, baby, very happy. Even though your job is hard and people are sometimes mean and you have to travel a lot, Ethan pulled her close. Even though all of that, because the hard work matters. Because when people are mean, it usually means you're doing something right that threatens something wrong.
And because you're worth everything, the long hours, the travel, the difficulty. I'm giving you a better life than I had, and that makes every challenge worth it. I'm proud of you. Maya said it simply, the way children state facts. You save people. That's what you do. Later, after Maya was asleep in the cottage's second bedroom, Ethan sat on the deck and called his parents' number, disconnected for 3 years now, but still in his phone. He'd gotten in the habit of calling it when he needed to feel connected to something beyond himself, to remember where he came from and why any of this mattered. He listened to the automated message, then started talking anyway, the way he always did. Dad, I wish you could see what I'm doing. The factories I'm fixing, they're just like Cascade was before it closed. Workers being ignored, equipment failing, management prioritizing profit over people. But I'm changing it. 6 facilities now, with more coming. I'm making sure what happened to you doesn't happen to others. The ocean provided the only response, waves rolling in eternal rhythm. I met a woman whose husband died in an industrial accident. Preventable, just like so many of Cascade's near misses. I apologized to her on behalf of the company. We built a memorial. We're implementing programs to make sure it never happens again. I think you would have approved. Ethan paused, looking up at stars emerging through breaking clouds. Maya's doing well. She's strong, Dad. Stronger than I was at her age. She's had to grow up too fast because of the choices I've made, but she's handling it with grace I didn't know kids could have. You would love her. The automated message had long since disconnected, but Ethan kept talking, the words finding their way out because some conversations needed to happen even when nobody was listening. I saved someone's life 6 months ago. A woman on a bridge who was about to be hit by a truck. That choice led to everything else, the job, the opportunities, the chance to make a difference. I keep thinking about that moment, about how close I came to driving past because I was late for an interview. What would have happened if I'd chosen differently? A shooting star crossed the sky, and Ethan smiled at the coincidence. But I didn't choose differently. I ran into traffic because someone needed help, and that decision revealed something about who I am. Someone who can't walk past trouble. Someone who believes people matter more than convenience or career or safety. You taught me that, Dad. Everything good about me came from watching you. How you showed up every day, even when Cascade didn't deserve your loyalty. How you put family first, even when it cost you professionally. How you kept your integrity when cutting corners would have been easier. The cottage door opened. Maya appeared in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Daddy? Who are you talking to? Just thinking out loud, baby. Can't sleep? Had another dream. Can we watch the ocean together? They sat on the deck wrapped in blankets, watching moonlight paint silver paths across dark water. Maya leaned against Ethan's shoulder, and he felt the complete peace that came from having exactly what mattered most. Tell me a story, Maya said. About when you were little. Ethan thought about his childhood in that small town where the factory closing had devastated everything. About his father coming home exhausted every day, still finding energy to throw a baseball or help with homework. About the way his mother had stretched every dollar, making poverty feel almost like an adventure because they were together. When I was about your age, my dad worked at a factory kind of like the ones I fix now. One day, another worker got hurt because equipment wasn't maintained properly. My dad went to management and demanded they fix it. They told him to mind his own business. So he organized the other workers, and together they refused to work until the equipment was repaired properly. Management gave in, and nobody else got hurt. Was your dad a hero? Yes? Not the kind that gets news coverage or recognition, the quiet kind that shows up every day and does the right thing even when it's hard, the best kind. Like you. Ethan kissed the top of her head. I'm trying to be, still learning. They stayed on the deck until Maya fell asleep in his arms. Ethan carried her inside, tucked her into bed, and stood watching her sleep for a long moment. 9 years old and already developing the strength and character that would carry her through life. He'd done that. kept her safe, given her stability, showed her through actions that integrity mattered more than success. The week at the beach passed in a blur of perfect moments. On their last day as they packed to leave, Maya found another sand dollar, cracked this time, imperfect, but still beautiful in its own way. "Can we keep this one?" she asked. "Why this one and not the perfect one?" Maya considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. Because perfect things should stay where they are, but broken things that are still beautiful, those are worth saving. Ethan looked at his daughter and felt his heart expand. 9 years old and already understanding truths that took most people decades to learn. "Yes, baby, we can keep this one." They drove back to Portland as the sun set, painting the highway in shades of amber and rose. Maya fell asleep in the back seat, clutching her imperfect sand dollar. Ethan drove and thought about bridges and choices and the impossible distance between desperate and secure. 6 months ago, he'd been drowning. Now he was directing operations for a major corporation, implementing changes that would protect thousands of workers, giving his daughter a life where she didn't have to worry about eviction notices or whether they could afford groceries. The bridge had been the catalyst, but everything that followed had been built through showing up, through refusing to accept that people were expendable, through believing that integrity was leverage instead of liability. His phone buzzed, a text from Victoria. "Welcome back. Montana just hit 95% efficiency 3 months ahead of schedule. Jack Reeves says to tell you thank you. Board meeting Tuesday to discuss expanding your model to our European facilities. Hope you're rested." Ethan smiled. European facilities. More factories, more workers, more opportunities to prove that corporations could succeed while treating people with dignity. The work was never finished, the problems never fully solved. But that was okay. He'd learned to find purpose in the struggle, meaning in the incremental progress, satisfaction in the small victories that added up to transformed lives. They arrived home late, and Ethan carried sleeping Maya upstairs to their apartment, bigger now, in a better neighborhood, with furniture that didn't come from thrift stores and appliances that actually worked. He tucked her into bed in her own room, something they hadn't been able to afford 6 months ago, and stood in the doorway watching her sleep. "I kept my promise," he whispered. "We went to the beach. We built sandcastles. We found perfect things and left them behind, and broken things worth saving. We remembered what matters." Maya stirred but didn't wake. Ethan closed her door gently and walked to the living room, looking out at Portland's lights. Somewhere out there, factories ran through the night. Workers operated equipment that functioned properly because someone cared enough to maintain it. Families slept secure because their providers had jobs at facilities that wouldn't close on a corporate whim. He'd done that. Not alone. Susan and Tom and Jack and Diane and countless others had done the actual work. But Ethan had believed it was possible when nobody else did. He'd run into traffic when someone needed help, and that single choice had cascaded into saving not just one life, but thousands. His phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Brooks, this is Miguel Cortez, Danny's son. Mom gave me your number. I'm starting engineering school this fall, specializing in industrial safety. Wanted you to know my dad's death is going to mean something. Thank you for making sure of that." Ethan read the message 3 times, feeling something profound settle in his chest. This was why the work mattered, not the promotions or the salary, or even the satisfaction of fixing broken systems. It was the 15-year-old who'd lost his father choosing to make that loss drive positive change. It was Maya learning that integrity led somewhere worth going. It was workers in 6 facilities going home safe every night because someone had finally decided their lives mattered more than quarterly reports. He typed back, "Your father would be proud of you. If you ever need anything, recommendation letters, internship opportunities, someone to talk to about the work, I'm here." The response came quickly. "Thank you. That means everything." Ethan set down his phone and walked to Maya's room one more time. She was sprawled across her bed the way children sleep, completely relaxed, perfectly safe. The cracked sand dollar sat on her nightstand, imperfect and beautiful and worth saving. Just like this life they'd built together. Just like the facilities he'd transformed. Just like every person who'd been written off as expendable until someone looked close enough to see their value. The bridge felt like a lifetime ago. But Ethan understood that every choice since then had flowed from that single moment of running toward trouble instead of away from it. He'd saved Victoria's life and lost an interview. But in losing that interview, he'd found something better, a purpose that aligned with his values, work that mattered beyond profit margins, the ability to prove that doing the right thing wasn't weakness, but strength. His father had taught him that. Cascade's closure had reinforced it, and Maya's existence had made it non-negotiable. The world didn't always reward integrity. Sometimes it punished it, made it expensive, made it lonely. But occasionally, rarely, impossibly, wonderfully, the world opened doors for people who refused to compromise on what mattered, who ran into traffic when someone needed help, who stood up to corruption even when it made them vulnerable, who believed that broken things were worth saving and perfect things were worth protecting. Ethan Brooks had been drowning 6 months ago, desperate and invisible, one more struggling single parent in a world that looked past people like him. Now he was director of operations for a major corporation, implementing changes that would ripple through industries, raising a daughter who understood that strength meant staying calm when people tried to make you angry, that courage meant showing up when showing up was hard. The journey wasn't over. European facilities waited. New problems would emerge. The resistance to change never fully disappeared. It just learned to be quieter, more subtle, more patient. But Ethan had learned something crucial in these 6 months, that showing up consistently mattered more than being perfect, that incremental progress compounded into transformation, that one person who refused to accept the unacceptable could shift entire systems. He was that person now, not because he was special or gifted or destined for it, but because when faced with an impossible choice on a rainy bridge, he'd chosen to run toward trouble instead of away from it. And that single decision had revealed everything else he was capable of becoming. Maya stirred in her sleep, murmuring something about sand dollars and starfish. Ethan smiled and whispered goodnight to his sleeping daughter, to the memory of his father, to the ghost of the desperate man he'd been 6 months ago on a bridge in the rain. Then he walked to his own room, exhausted and satisfied, and already thinking about Tuesday's board meeting, about European facilities and new challenges, and the endless work of building systems that protected people instead of exploiting them. Some people spent their lives wondering what they were meant to do. Ethan had found his answer in the space between seeing someone in danger and deciding to help. Everything else, the success, the recognition, the security, the meaning, had simply been the inevitable result of staying true to that first instinct. He'd saved lives, fixed factories, proved that integrity mattered, given his daughter a future worth building toward. And he'd done it all because one rainy morning, when faced with a choice between self-interest and helping a stranger, he'd chosen to be the kind of person who ran into traffic instead of past it. That choice had cost him everything he thought he needed, and given him everything he'd never known to ask for. The story could have ended a dozen different ways, but this was the ending Ethan had earned. Not perfect, not complete, but honest and hard-won, and pointing toward a future built on foundations that wouldn't crumble the first time they were tested. He fell asleep thinking about sandcastles and shooting stars, and the impossible distance between drowning and standing on solid ground. And when morning came, he would get up and do it all again, showing up, making hard choices, proving that broken things were worth saving and people mattered more than systems and integrity was the only leverage that lasted. Because that's what heroes did, even the quiet ones who never made the news. They just kept showing up, kept doing the right thing, kept believing that one person could make a difference. And sometimes, impossibly, wonderfully, they were right.